Chapter 244. Lin Jin deduced from the perspective of spells. His guess wasn't entirely out of his league, but it was only possible if he had thoroughly studied this barrier technique. Lin Jin didn't want to think too much about it now. He had expended too much energy and his body was stiff from the old dragon's frosty winds. He needed time to recover. Not only him, but White Ape was also heavily injured. He was now lying on the side, panting heavily. Xiaohua fared better as he stayed by Lin Jin's side. Under such circumstances, Lin Jin couldn't go to the visitation hall. He could only recover first while performing acupuncture to stimulate his blood circulation and expel the frost. Simultaneously, all 6 visitors had arrived in the visitation hall. He Qing looked anxious as she stared at the steel door on the 2nd floor, waiting for the curator. She was no longer her usual lively self. This piqued the others' curiosity. "Sis, what's wrong? Did you run into some trouble? Tell me about it." Madame Ghostchild stepped forward with a smile. Thanks to the curator's treatment, her condition had been improving day by day. She was no longer as frightening as before. No matter how one looked at her, she looked like a gentle young married woman, like a ripe peach. There were only 2 women in the visitation hall. Although there was a huge age gap between them, they were very close to each other. He Qing clutched the corner of her shirt, looking rather haggard. She said, "Sister Ghostchild, I'm in trouble but you might not be able to help me." If someone else had said this, Ghostchild might have gotten angry. But she knew He Qing's personality so she didn't flare up. Instead, she approached her and asked softly. The 2 women were having a private conversation so no one else could eavesdrop. On the other side, Black Crow chuckled and pulled Yi Yuzhou to Jiang Ziqi's side. "Old Jiang, the berries you brought last time were delicious and full of spiritual energy. Did you bring some this time?" Black Crow was a bloodthirsty killer and even more delicious. Seeing that the curator wasn't here yet, he couldn't hold it in anymore and came over to ask for some food. At the same time, he handed Jiang Ziqi a bottle of aged wine. Jiang Ziqi smiled and pointed to a pouch beside him. Black Crow understood and immediately picked it up. Sure enough, it was filled with berries of various colors. Old Tian shamelessly came over and the 4 of them started chatting. They could talk about anything under the sky. There was no need to mention Black Crow. Jiang Ziqi used to be a bandit in his early years, so the things he had seen and heard were unimaginable to most people. The only weak one was Old Tian. However, ever since Old Tian changed his attitude, he had at least adjusted his attitude. If he didn't understand something, he would listen more and speak less. He was already very satisfied with the occasional interjection. After all, being able to interject meant that he could integrate into the group, which was a good thing. As they chatted, they started talking about Snake Country. Black Crow whispered, "Old Yi, you mentioned that curator has a disciple in the Jade Dragon Kingdom." Yi Yuzhou nodded. "It's true. I've even met the curator outside." "Really?" All of a sudden, not only Heya, but even Jiang Ziqi looked over curiously, waiting for Yi Yuzhou to explain. Yi Yuzhou laughed heartily. Back then, curator was wearing a strange tree bark mask. He stood on the hill and with a wave of his hand, he suppressed all the beasts. That kind of pressure was indeed unique to curator. Yeah. With curator's cultivation, he's invincible even without his pet beast, Jiang Ziqi added. Black Crow looked up at the 2nd floor and muttered, "Curator isn't here yet." Everyone was stunned. That's right. Something wasn't right this time. Under normal circumstances, the visitation hall had been open for more than 2 hours, so curator should be here by now. Did something happen? Old Tian interrupted at this moment. But clearly, no one took his speculation seriously. Curator is invincible. What could possibly happen? Black Crow asked. He recalled the first time he visited the visitation hall. Back then, he wanted to fight curator but his pet beast was defeated in an instant. He still couldn't forget the pressure back then. It's fine. We still have plenty of time, so it's fine to wait a little longer. Yiyujo seemed to have thought of something. He knew that Lin Jin was going to the royal capital with Lu Bin, but he didn't know what Lin Jin was up to. However, if Lin Jin's disciple had gone to the royal capital, Curator might have gone as well. Yiyujo was deep in thought when He Qing walked over. Senior Yi. He Qing bowed, hesitant to speak. Yiyujo could tell that she had something to say, so he walked to the side to talk to her alone. You must be Senior Yiyujo of Maple City's Friar Association? He Qing went straight to the point. Yiyujo was startled. However, he had a hunch about He Qing's identity. He nodded before saying, I heard you say that your surname is He and it's the surname of Jade Dragon Kingdom's royalty. You must be a member of the royal family, right? He Qing nodded. Princess He Qing. Oh, it's you, 7th princess. Yiyujo saluted. What a coincidence. To think there was a member of the Jade Dragon Kingdom's royal family in the visitation hall. And by the looks of it, she was the first visitor here. He Qing suddenly said, I've met Curator's disciple. Yiyujo's heart skipped a beat. He knew that He Qing was talking about Lin Jin. He Qing told him about what happened after Lin Jin entered the royal capital. Ghost Child came over and stood beside her, but she didn't say a word. I met Appraiser Lin the other day. After I met Appraiser Lin the other day, I was locked up in my yard, and I couldn't go out anymore. There were many people guarding outside, so I knew something must have happened outside. However, they didn't know that I could visit the living room. When Curator arrives later, I'll have to inform him and have him inform Appraiser Lin to be careful. I suspect that someone is trying to harm him, He Qing said anxiously. Appraiser Lin, you're not going to let me in. Someone like Yiyujo had heard about the curse of Jade Dragon Kingdom's royal family. He didn't expect Lin Jin to be dealing with this matter this time. Yiyujo knew how deep the royal capital's waters were. Several of the royal family's princesses had died prematurely because of this curse. If it was easy to solve, how could the Jade Dragon Kingdom's power not have allowed it to drag on until now? Either the enemy was too strong for them to handle, or they were entangled with deep-rooted interests. At the very least, they were forced to do so. Regardless of the reason, the royal family's curse wasn't something that could be easily solved. Could it be that Curator was late today because of this? Yiyujo guessed. If that was the case, this would be troublesome. If Curator spoke up, should Yiyujo get involved? For a moment, Yiyujo fell into deep thought. Just then, the steel door to the second floor was finally pushed open. Chapter 245. Lin Jin rested for at least half an hour before he managed to expel some of the cold energy from his body. However, as proficient in the vein strengthening technique, Lin Jin realized that this cold energy had a miraculous effect on his veins. After some deduction, he confirmed that this was a blessing in disguise. By attaching fire spirit energy to the needle and the cold energy to unblock his veins, the effect of vein strengthening was even better. This was why Lin Jin spent so much time on this. At least his physical body and spirit energy were getting stronger. Once he was more or less recovered, Lin Jin decided to treat White Ape. After all, he had to be wary of the old dragon's next move. However, Lin Jin knew that the old dragon didn't gain much from this. Just the meridian that Lin Jin's coiled wire needle had shattered was enough to keep the old dragon from stirring up trouble again for some time. Besides, the old dragon might not have the guts to do so. However, if the old dragon didn't dare, he might resort to other means. For example, he might call for someone else to cause trouble. Lin Jin hadn't forgotten about the suicide squad from before. He couldn't stay in this small yard anymore. He had brought Xiaohua and White Ape out overnight. After making sure it was safe, he stepped into the visitation hall. This must have taken up a lot of time. With the curator's mask on, no one could sense Lin Jin's current aura and condition. Pushing the door open, Lin Jin saw He Qing downstairs. She seemed fine. She hadn't come looking for him for the past few days, so she was probably trapped. He then asked, and sure enough, that was the case. Curator, please tell your disciple not to worry. If I can get out, I'll look for him immediately. Also, does Curator know how my sister is doing? This was clearly He Qing's biggest concern. She was locked up here, so she obviously didn't know about He Yu's condition. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin said, "It's a little troublesome, but she should be fine." He was obviously referring to his golden needle. With his psyche imbued on the needle, as long as he wasn't too far away, he could sense He Yu's condition. Although He Yu was weak and unconscious, her life wasn't in danger. As long as she had the golden needle protecting her heart, she would be fine. Although her condition wouldn't worsen, there was no way for it to get better either. He could only use the needle to protect her heart so that the bestial soul curse wouldn't devour her completely. This was a stalemate. If this dragged on, it would become a problem. Hence, to Lin Jin, time was precious. He Qing didn't mention Lu Bin's situation either. This meant that she didn't know either. After all, after seeing him that day, she was put under house arrest and couldn't get out. No one dared to interrupt Lin Jin and He Qing's conversation. It wasn't until the curator fell silent that Ghost Child spoke up. "Curator, if you need any help, just ask." His words made his stance clear. Black Crow quickly added, "I've been to the Jade Dragon Kingdom before. Since Evil Scholar and I haven't returned yet, there's no harm in us making a trip to Cloud Dragon Kingdom." Lin Jin said nothing. This was Jade Dragon Kingdom's imperial city after all. Moreover, Jade Dragon Kingdom's emperor might be here to stop them. But for now, it would be troublesome for Lin Jin to deal with this alone. That old dragon was a tough nut to crack. If the visitation hall hadn't opened at the critical moment and the curator's mask's aura hadn't rushed out to scare the old dragon away, Lin Jin would have been in danger. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin said, "If it's on the way, just drop by. But remember to keep a low profile. If you've arrived, wait at Huji Tea House in the Imperial City. I'll have my disciple look for you." Ghost Child and Black Crow nodded. This was a trivial matter to them. Although Jade Dragon Kingdom had a strong background, villainous experts like them had no qualms about it. They were greatly indebted to the curator, so as long as the curator asked, they would be duty-bound to help. Yiyujo wanted to go too, but Lin Jin didn't agree. Unlike Ghost Child and Black Crow, Yiyujo's identity was slightly different. He was a citizen of Jade Dragon Kingdom and a guardian of the nation. If they ended up going against Jade Dragon Kingdom's emperor because of He Yu, Yiyujo would be in trouble. Black Crow and Ghost Child were fine but not Yiyujo. Moreover, with these two experts around, it didn't matter if Yiyujo went or not. Next, Lin Jin answered their questions about pet beasts but didn't leave immediately. Instead, he asked them about their understanding of barriers. Lin Jin decided to focus on this spell for a while. The old dragon was too powerful. Lin Jin had learned from his mistake. If he could improve his barrier skills, he could at least borrow the curator's aura at any time. While he couldn't actually harm the old dragon, he could definitely scare him off. Black Crow didn't have much knowledge in spells, so he was deep in thought. Yiyujo and Ghost Child, on the other hand, could offer some insight. Yiyujo clearly knew more about this subject. Lin Jin had learned a lot from their discussion, and they were all the best of the best. As expected of the #1 mentor of Maple City's Friar Association, Yiyujo was indeed knowledgeable. Lin Jin took out the starry banner he obtained so that Yiyujo and the others could take a look and see if they could figure it out. "This is the Nebula Barrier," Yiyujo was the first to exclaim. He took the banner and studied it before nodding profusely. "Curator, this is a treasure. It must have been passed down from ancient times. If you study it carefully, even if you can only comprehend 1 or 2% of it, you'll still benefit immeasurably." Yiyujo wasn't exaggerating. Even Lin Jin could sense the uniqueness of this banner. He only brought it out to see if the others could figure it out. Ghost Child's words were similar to Yiyujo's. However, she knew she couldn't compare to Yiyujo in terms of spell research, so she didn't say much. Black Crow pondered for a moment and suddenly remembered something. He smacked his forehead and said to the black falcon perched on his shoulder. The latter reluctantly spat something out. It was an ancient book. Curator, I just looted an ancient immortal's cave a few months ago, and there was an ancient book with the Nebula Barrier written on it. Black Crow presented the book to Lin Jin. Intrigued, Lin Jin immediately invoked a spell to retrieve it. Now wasn't the time to be courteous. The moment he took a look, he was overwhelmed with excitement. Sure enough, it was the Nebula Barrier, and it was quite detailed. Curator, now that the spirit energy in the world has withered and the path of immortality has been severed, I'll be honest with you. I've studied this spell before, but I couldn't cultivate it, so I kept it with me. I thought it sounded familiar just now, so I remembered there was such a book. Since I don't have much use for it, why don't I give it to you, Curator? Black Crow was generous. Next to him, Yiyujo laughed. Old Hay, the storage technique in your black feather god's mouth is quite amazing. Black Crow smiled awkwardly. It's just a small trick. I wouldn't dare claim to be impressive before you, old Yi. Chapter 246. Black Crow wasn't being humble. Among everyone here, in terms of knowledge and understanding of spells, Yiyujo was undoubtedly the best. There was no doubt about that. Yiyujo quickly waved his hand. Curator is still here. Don't say that. Black Crow laughed. Lin Jin didn't pay attention to what they were talking about. All his attention was on the Nebula Barrier. Indeed, according to what Black Crow said, almost no cultivator could cultivate this ancient spell because it required too much spiritual chi and realm. However, there was always more than one way to learn spells. Didn't that old dragon just cast it? What the other party used was not his own ability, but the little flag. It was the same to cast a spell with the help of an artifact. However, this required time to comprehend. Lin Jin asked the visitors, and after making sure there were no problems, he told He Qing not to worry. Right now, He Qing couldn't be of any help. This was a grudge between Lin Jin and the old dragon, and it had escalated to a personal grudge. No one would be able to tolerate the old dragon coming here to kill them. Anyway, Lin Jin definitely couldn't tolerate it. White Ape's severe injuries were one of the reasons. Lin Jin was extremely protective of his people, and he had to get his revenge. Also, He Yu's bestial soul curse was hard to control. If Lin Jin had sealed it on He Yu's pinky and pierced it with his golden needles, he was confident he could break the curse. But now, the curse was retaliating and it had penetrated deep into her bones. Even if Lin Jin were to see He Yu right now, he might not be able to save her. However, it wasn't as if there was no solution. Killing the culprit behind the curse, the old dragon, was the simplest and most direct way to resolve the curse. However, dealing with this rank 5 dragon was difficult. Even if Black Crow and Ghost Child came back to help, they might not be the old dragon's match. To forge iron, one must be strong. Lin Jin mumbled inwardly. Then, he bade farewell to the visitors before opening the door and exiting. Lin Jin didn't leave the visitation hall entirely. Instead, he sat cross-legged outside the door and began studying the flag and the Nebula Barrier. As long as Lin Jin didn't leave this place, he could stay here for several more hours. Seeing the curator come and go in a hurry, everyone in the visitation hall understood that this was no trivial matter. Black Crow and Ghost Child didn't waste any time. They cupped their fists and bid farewell to the others before pushing the door open and leaving. They had to rush to the Jade Dragon Kingdom as soon as possible. After all, the curator had summoned them, so they had to be careful. Perhaps this time, not only would they be able to meet the curator, but they might even receive his guidance. The others did not leave immediately. He Qing had been under house arrest for the past 2 days and was already feeling suffocated. At this time, she needed someone to talk to. Jiang Ziki did not leave immediately either. Yuzhou naturally had many things he wanted to talk to He Qing about. Even old Tian was listening by the side. Although this matter had nothing to do with him, and the Jade Dragon Kingdom was far from where he was, he knew he had to use this opportunity to get closer to everyone. This way they might be able to help him in the future. Especially now that he knew that this delicate young lady was a royal princess of Jade Dragon Kingdom, he became even more attentive towards her. He didn't know how to fight for others, but he could chat with them and help them solve their problems. Jade Dragon City, the sun had just risen. There were always people who woke up early. Some were merchants, some were hawkers, and some were carriage drivers. Some of them passed by the yard Lin Jin rented and saw the destruction. What was even more unbelievable was that the damage within the yard's walls was severe. The house had collapsed and the walls were cracked. Not only were there traces of fire, but there was also snow and ice. It was as if this place had experienced fire and frost overnight, the transition between summer and winter. Afraid to enter, they quickly went to report the matter to the authorities. However, not long after they left, several groups of people came to investigate. The first group was dressed in black with fierce expressions. Upon entering the yard, they looked around. After confirming that there was no one around, they left immediately, heading toward the Jade Dragon Temple. Soon, the second group arrived. They also looked around before heading toward the palace. The government officials were the third to arrive. Naturally, they were here to investigate the scene and try to figure out what had happened here. The officials naturally immediately found out who the owner of this small courtyard belonged to. After finding the owner, they inquired and found out that this place had just been rented to an outsider the day before yesterday. In the end, this incident happened. It was obvious that the owner was bawling his eyes out at the sight of the destroyed yard. However, if someone was renting a place, they would usually leave something behind. The authorities soon found out that Maple City's Lin Jin was the one who rented this place. Zhang Mengliang, the royal capital's government official, looked helpless. There was even a hint of apprehension on his face. Why is it Appraiser Lin again? Zhang Mengliang didn't know what to say. He had sent someone to investigate the scene, and it was obvious that an expert had gone looking for trouble. Forget it, this should be the third time. The first 2 times, it was Appraiser Lin who came to report to the authorities. But for the third time, Appraiser Lin was nowhere to be found. Could something have happened to him? Or was he killed by someone? Appraiser Lin was General Lu's good friend. If this incident wasn't handled properly, it could lead to a disaster. That was why it was difficult to be an official in the capital. Zhang Mengliang was now in the same situation. No matter what, let's find Appraiser Lin first. Remember, if he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Zhang Mengliang instructed the constables. Naturally, he didn't dare to take responsibility for this, so he quickly reported it to his superiors. After all, if he couldn't do it, he wouldn't be the only one suffering. Inside the palace, Emperor He Qian listened to the report from the eunuch in charge. His expression was inscrutable. Your Majesty, the strangest thing was that everything in that small courtyard was destroyed. If it wasn't destroyed, it was burned or it was frozen in ice and snow. There was an imperial guard who stretched out his hand to touch it, and the coldness was overwhelming. The eunuch bowed as he spoke. He Qian thought for a moment before asking, "Have you seen Appraiser Lin?" The eunuch shook his head. The guards have secretly investigated, but they couldn't find any traces of Appraiser Lin. Moreover, Lord Zhang has sent people to search the entire city. He Qian nodded. What did the imperial physician say? The head eunuch quickly replied, "Your Majesty, the imperial physicians are keeping watch. The 6th princess is still unconscious, but she hasn't deteriorated. It looks like there won't be any changes for the time being." He Qian was silent for a moment. Then, as if he was mumbling to himself, he asked, "Yao Xing, you've been in the palace for a long time. You were there when my third sister died. Do you remember what happened? At this, the head eunuch fell to his knees. This old servant remembers. Tell me, I can't remember what my sister looked like back then, He Qian said. When He Qian said this, the eunuch named Yao Xing hurriedly said, that year, the third princess was only 10 days away from adulthood. At that time, the third princess was already so haggard and skinny that she no longer looked human. It was indeed tragic. I think she was already like this a month ago. Chapter 247. He Qian nodded, a pained expression on his face as he recalled the past. It's more than torture. She's living a life worse than death. Yao Xing nodded, not daring to continue the conversation. Yao Xing, let me ask you, how is Yuer's condition compared to her third aunt? He Qian asked. Eunuch Yao Xing was startled. This was a difficult question to answer. If he answered incorrectly, the emperor would be displeased. After a moment of hesitation, Yao Xing plucked up his courage and said, Sixth princess condition is much better. At least, she doesn't look as painful. He Qian nodded. I knew it. You think so too. Yao Xing wiped his sweat. He was right. Yao Xing, do you think I should take a gamble this time? He Qian suddenly asked a baffling question. Yao Xing had served He Qian for more than a decade, so how could he not know why the emperor would ask such a question? However, he really couldn't answer this question. He wouldn't even dare to try his luck like he did earlier. Yao Xing immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed. I only know how to serve your majesty. I really don't know anything about something as important as this. He Qian laughed at this. Get up. I was just asking. Yao Xing trembled, and his legs trembled a little. Then came silence. He Qian was clearly deep in thought. Even when the tea in his cup had gone cold, he didn't take a sip. Yao Xing. Yes, your majesty. Arrange for the guards to investigate Lin Jin's whereabouts. If they find him, bring him to me in secret. Remember, this must be kept a secret, He Qian ordered sternly. Yao Xing bowed at once and left to make the arrangements. This eunuch was clearly He Qian's confidant. For the next 2 days, the royal capital remained peaceful. While it looked calm on the surface, there were actually turbulent undercurrents. Somewhere in the royal capital, in a dilapidated mansion, Xiaohuo was quietly nestled in a clump of weeds with White Ape next to him. White Ape had a strong physique, and with Lin Jin treating his injuries, he had recovered quickly over the past 2 days. His heavy injuries were no longer a problem. At this moment, White Ape was bored to death. He began to walk back and forth in the courtyard, looking left and right. Xiaohua had found this uninhabited courtyard last night. In the past 2 days, they had changed their hiding places 3 times. Fortunately, Xiaohua and White Ape could change their bodies to normal sizes, so they would not attract too much attention. For 2 days, Lin Jin never showed up. This had never happened before. Lin Jin had never been separated from his pet beast for 2 consecutive days. However, Xiaohua was not anxious. He could feel the power of the blood contract and knew that his master was currently safe and sound. At this time, White Ape went to the back of the house and suddenly saw a big date on the ground in front of him. The red jujube was very beautiful. White Ape immediately stepped forward to examine it. After confirming that there were no problems, he picked it up and was about to put it in his mouth. However, when he thought of Xiaohua, White Ape suddenly hesitated. Should it eat it or share it with Xiaohua? Obviously, this was a big problem for the White Ape, so much so that it could not make up its mind. Just then, there was a clatter in front of him as another date fell. White Ape could clearly see that this date had been thrown in from outside the courtyard. Being extremely intelligent, White Ape knew that someone was luring him, so he immediately went on guard. The person outside probably realized that White Ape wasn't fooled, so he poked his head out and waved at White Ape. "Brother Ape, look over here." He spoke very softly, afraid that he would startle Xiaohua, who was sleeping soundly in the front yard. White Ape frowned as he stared at the monkey-like person outside the yard. He looked rather familiar. Shoo! The person made a shushing gesture before flipping over the wall. His movements were nimble and nimble. This time, White Ape could clearly see that this person had a tail behind him. White Ape's eyes lit up. "Brother Ape, come with me," the monkey demon whispered before immediately flipping over the wall, clearly afraid of disturbing Xiaohua, who was in the yard. White Ape hesitated for a moment, but he could sense that the monkey demon had no ill intentions. Perhaps he was also an ape, so out of curiosity, he also flipped over the wall and followed the monkey demon. Yes, Brother Ape, you've made me look for you for the past few days. Coincidentally, Master and I were resting nearby when we sensed your aura. That's why we came over to take a look. Indeed, you're here." The monkey demon was very enthusiastic. White Ape could not speak at the moment, but he could understand what others were saying. At this moment, he pointed at his throat and waved his hand. The monkey demon chuckled. "I know. Brother Ape, you haven't cultivated the human language and can't speak yet. It's fine. Accompany me to see Master later. If you follow us in the future, I guarantee that you'll be able to speak human language within a year." At this moment, White Ape stopped. He turned his head to look at the courtyard from before, a little hesitant. In terms of craftiness, the monkey demon was clearly better at it. He said, "Brother Ape, you're an ape and I'm a monkey. We're family. Don't worry, I won't harm you. Master and I can even help you." Upon hearing this, White Ape was a little tempted. Now that Master Lin was not around, only he and Xiaohua were left. Although Master Lin had instructed them to hide in the capital and wait for his return before he left, White Ape could not help but feel anxious after not seeing Master Lin return for 2 days. He saw that the monkey demon seemed to have some ability. Moreover, he had a master and did not have any ill intentions. Perhaps he could rope him in as a helper. At this thought, White Ape nodded. The monkey demon was overjoyed. He led the way, chatting and joking. However, he was the only one talking to himself. Fortunately, he said that the place they were resting at was not far. Indeed, after circling around, they arrived at another dilapidated and uninhabited courtyard. This place was clearly more dilapidated. There was a huge tree in the courtyard and an old Taoist was sitting under it. There was roasted chicken and aged wine in front of the old Taoist. He was pouring himself a cup of wine and looked rather at ease. "Master!" The monkey demon jumped in from outside the courtyard. At this moment, he was no longer walking with a straight back like a human. He was now bent over and scratching his ears and cheeks. It was obvious that he had been holding it in. "You mischievous monkey. You went out to stir up trouble again, didn't you? How many times have I told you that Jade Dragon City is a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons? It's no small matter. You must be careful." The old Taoist reprimanded him. At the same time, he quickly hid the roasted chicken and aged wine behind him. His actions were so swift that it left one speechless. However, the monkey demon had a sharp nose and was already drooling. "Master, is there food? I can smell it. It's roasted chicken from the Tian family's roasted chicken shop and aged wine from Fur restaurant," the monkey demon said as he licked his lips. "Shoo shoo shoo. Most of the food I brought back last time went into your tummy, you mischievous monkey. No matter what, I'll have to eat my fill before it's your turn," the old Taoist scolded. Suddenly, he was stunned when he saw White Ape jumping in behind him. One look and the old Taoist's expression changed. Chapter 248. White Ape had also climbed over the wall. When he saw the old Taoist, he looked him up and down. The old Taoist was also looking at White Ape in surprise. "Revered Master, this Brother Ape is the one I mentioned to you 2 days ago. He's the same species as me, and his aura far surpasses mine. However, he has yet to cultivate his hybrid bone, and has yet to cultivate the art of speech. He should have no one to guide him. It'd be a pity if he were to waste his talent. The monkey demon's face was filled with glee, as though he had just done something amazing. Although White Ape had climbed over the wall, he did not approach. He stood by the wall so that he could climb over if anything happened. The White Ape could not speak, but its intelligence was not bad at all. Naturally, the old Taoist could see that. The monkey demon was still chattering. The old Taoist was annoyed and immediately scolded, "You naughty monkey, shut up! Be quiet!" The monkey demon wilted. At this time, the old Taoist looked at the White Ape from head to toe. His heart skipped a beat as he said, "The demonic aura is restrained and pure. It contains light and spirit. Amazing, amazing! May I ask who your master is?" After saying that, the old Taoist looked around guiltily, not knowing what he was guarding against. Seeing that the old Taoist was polite, White Ape went forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Although he was naked and covered in white fur, he looked no different from a human. The old Taoist was even more certain that the monkey demon had been taught by someone. Moreover, that person's cultivation was not much lower than his. The old Taoist looked at the monkey demon with a reproachful expression. "You naughty monkey, how can you kidnap someone's disciple? I'll punish you later." The monkey demon looked aggrieved. "Master, I'm being wronged. This brother ape doesn't even know how to speak. He's just gifted. Moreover, there's only a young man by his side. There's no expert by his side." I felt sorry for him, so, the old Taoist frowned and scolded, "How dare you talk back?" Perhaps seeing that the old Taoist was really angry, the monkey demon did not dare to say another word. The old Taoist coughed and looked around. He suddenly said, "Wu Qian of Mount Tianha's Cloud sect greets you. Fellow Taoist, please show yourself." His voice was not loud, but it echoed. It was enough to show that he was skilled. However, the old Taoist's move left the monkey demon and White Ape dumbfounded. The two demonic beasts stood rooted to the ground and looked at the old Taoist in confusion. The White Ape could not speak, and the monkey demon could not speak. The two demonic beasts were very intelligent and intelligent. The meaning behind the old Taoist's words was that someone had followed them. But there was no problem. After waiting for a while, naturally, no one answered. The old Taoist was a little surprised. He repeated himself, but still, no one said a word. This time, the monkey demon could not stand it any more. He said, "Master, there's no one else here. It's just me and Brother Ape. Who are you talking to?" "That's weird." The old Taoist ignored the monkey demon. He pinched his fingers and calculated, and the expression on his face became more serious. "Forget it." Unable to figure it out, the old Taoist priest did not delve too deeply into this matter. Instead, he cupped his hands towards the White Ape and said, "Since your esteemed teacher is not here, please do as you please." Looking at the Taoist priest's appearance, it was obvious that he didn't intend to provoke the White Ape. But even though he said so, his eyes never left the White Ape. The White Ape could understand the old Taoist priest's meaning, but he could not speak, so he was a little anxious. He could also see that the old Taoist priest was very capable. Master Lin was nowhere to be found, and the old dragon that came looking for trouble that night was very powerful. So, the White Ape thought that if the old Taoist priest could help, it would be a good thing. So he stepped forward and made a sound, wanting to speak. The old Taoist priest could also see that he was very interested in the White Ape. Now that the White Ape had taken the initiative to walk over, he could not suppress his curiosity. Moreover, the White Ape's master was not here, so he might as well study the White Ape. The old Taoist priest said, "Don't be anxious." Having said that, he looked up and down, and reached out to touch the White Ape's thick arm. He was stunned. This is the art of transformation. Brilliant. This demon has already matured, but its demonic chi is not pure. It has not been more than a month since it became a demon. What kind of person could teach the wild ape to such a level in less than a month? Amazing. The old Taoist priest looked envious, but at the same time there was a hint of fear. He had some tricks up his sleeve. He could see that the white ape had been maintaining the transformation technique. Clearly, its true form was not what it appeared to be. Other than that, he could also see that the white ape seemed to be cultivating some other superior technique. In this era, techniques were hard to find, and those that could be cultivated were even rarer. For example, the monkey demon that he had brought along was only at the second rank, but it had cultivated with him for more than 10 years. Even so, it had only cultivated a basic demonic cultivation technique. The old Taoist priest's forte was refining the hyoid bone, which was why the monkey demon could speak human language. As for the transformation technique, the monkey demon had cultivated for many years, but could only make it look like this. As for the monkey tail, it could not be removed no matter what. Helpless, it could only hide it in its robes, afraid that it would be discovered. Now, the more he observed, the more confused he became. The white ape's true form was definitely not like what he had seen so far. Could not maintain the transformation technique. At least, the old Taoist priest could not do it. Moreover, the white ape beast species seemed to only exist in the grassy continent. It was huge and extremely difficult to tame. The grassy continent white ape was huge and powerful, but lacked sentience. It was extremely difficult to cultivate a grassy continent beast into a monster. But the white ape before him had clearly become a monster. More importantly, its sentience was not bad at all. The old Taoist was suddenly tempted. To him, the path of blood contracts did not hold much meaning. It was only to borrow the strength of a pet beast to strengthen oneself. To him, it was not a great path. His cloud sect in Mount Tianhe had some legacies. There were demonic cultivation techniques and the ancient path of spiritual refinement. However, in his generation, Cloud Sect only had 2 or 3 people left. It was practically dead. The old Taoist was not convinced. For decades, he had struggled and wandered the world to seek out experts. Unfortunately, the world was vast and it was difficult to find true immortals. Now that he had seen the white ape, he could tell that it was cultivating an orthodox demonic cultivation technique. Its master must be extraordinary. Since that was the case, why not use this opportunity to form a good relationship? The old Taoist priest felt that this was indeed an opportunity. Their cloud sect had a 1,000-year heritage. Even if they were on the verge of collapse, they still had some asset. Among them were many edicts. Edicts were written on yellow paper talismans. Each one was a treasure. Over the past few centuries, most of the edicts had been used, but some remained. One of them was an edict that could be used to refine the hyoid bone using Taoist art. This allowed the monster to speak. It was said that in ancient times, edicts like this weren't considered precious. But now, the old Taoist only had 2 of them left. Looking at the white ape, the old Taoist pondered. Why not help the white ape? This way, his master would surely have a good impression of him. When the time came, the white ape wouldn't refuse his master's advice. He acted immediately. Chapter 249. The old Taoist was not a petty person. He had traveled the world over the years and experienced the mortal world. His personality was already carefree. Even if he did not gain anything in the end, it was fate that he had met this white ape. When fate had come, even if he gave the other party some benefits, what was wrong with that? The old Taoist took out the edict talisman. It was old and tattered, so he had to be careful with it. If he was not careful, it might break. There was another reason why the old Taoist was willing to use it. This thing could not be kept for long. There were a few that he did not have time to use before losing their effectiveness or the talisman was damaged. These 2 were obviously going to break soon. He might as well find an opportunity to use them. At least it was better than throwing them away. At this thought, the old Taoist made a hand seal and said to the white ape, "White ape, "O White Ape, you are quite lucky to have met me. Today I will give you a great opportunity." Before the White Ape could react, the old Taoist said, "Heaven and earth, the sun and moon shine, the nebula gather, the Tao of yin and yang, life and death, the Tao is one, the Tao is one, the Tao is one, the Tao is one, and the Tao is one." The edict talisman in his hand ignited and an invisible force struck the White Ape. The latter jumped in fright and hurriedly jumped away, his face full of fear. But very quickly the White Ape froze. He actually coughed and said, "Eh?" The monkey demon knew the old Taoist's method and immediately jumped up and down in joy. "Brother Ape, you're in luck. Master actually used the edict talisman on you. This is a priceless treasure." The monkey demon ran over to speak. The White Ape's eyes widened in surprise and he coughed a few more times. I. The White Ape heard it himself and was stunned. Then he said, I can actually speak?" Although there was still something wrong with the tone, and it could not be heard clearly, there was no doubt that the White Ape had mastered the ability to speak. After getting used to it, he became more and more familiar with it. The expression on his face also became more and more excited. "Can it really be done? Ha 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 ha, this is great, this is great. When I go back, I can talk to Shonger and Little Five. Right, if Master Lin knew, he would definitely be happy." The White Ape's voice was rough, but one could already tell what he was saying. When the old Taoist heard this, he knew that the Master Lin mentioned by the White Ape must be his master. White Ape naturally knew that it had benefited from Master Lin. Otherwise, it would have taken at least 1 to 2 months to refine the Hygide bone with Shonger and Little Five. Master Lin once said that when I receive favors from others, I have to repay them with gratitude. White Ape thought to himself as he took a few steps forward and bowed to the Taoist priest. This etiquette was very proper, but because it was done by White Ape, it looked rather comical. However, White Ape didn't think so. He said, "Thank you, Taoist priest, for enlightening me. White Ape is very grateful." The old Taoist smiled and said, It's fine, it's fine. It's just something I did casually. It's fate that we met. Besides, our Cloud sect has never discriminated against Yao cultivators. Our sect's Grandmaster even received a favor from a Yao cultivator." At this moment, the monkey demon also came over. White Ape also expressed his gratitude solemnly. Compared to the monkey demon's jumpy temperament, the White Ape was obviously a lot steadier. Of course, this was only relative. At this time, the old Taoist asked what he wanted to ask. "White Ape, I see that your cultivation is stable. May I know who your master is?" White Ape thought for a moment and said, "My master's surname is Lin and his name is Jean. I became his disciple at Mount Zoraku." At this point, the old Taoist priest said, "So it's Lin Jean from Mount Zoraku." In his mind, he was trying to figure out what sect and heritage this Mount Zoraku was. However, at this moment, a wolf's howl came from nearby. It wasn't loud, but it was urgent. White Ape's ears twitched. "Oh no, it's a fire wolf!" After he finished speaking, he didn't have time to say anything else. He immediately leaped out of the courtyard and sprinted toward the courtyard where Xiaohua was. Inside the yard, Xiaohua's body was covered in flames. A dragon beast as thick as a human's thigh was wrapped around its body. The dragon beast's body was like jade and ice crystals. Cold air surged, suppressing Xiaohua's flames. Moreover, the force of the entanglement was so great that Xiaohua couldn't break free in a short time. Seeing this, White Ape's eyes turned bloodshot and he rushed forward. Who would have thought that the jade dragon would open its mouth and release a gust of cold air? Although it wasn't as cold as the old dragon's, it was still unusually cold. White Ape was hit squarely by the cold air and half of his body was covered in frost. At the same time, a spotted python slithered over from the other side. It was as thick as a wooden barrel and over 100 feet long. In the blink of an eye, it had coiled around White Ape. On a rooftop outside the yard, A bald, bearded man was playing a bamboo flute. The sound was soft, but he could control the spotted python. With a sudden tug, White Ape couldn't move. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Beside the bald, bearded man was a coquettish woman. Behind her was a blood-colored bat that was half the height of a person. If it were to spread its wings, it would probably be 10 feet long. Heh heh heh, I've taken someone's money to get rid of a disaster. This is a job where I can take money and kill people. It's really not bad. Especially when I can work with you, Bloodbat, a famous beauty in the evil path. It's even more wonderful, the bald man said with a face full of anticipation. The woman beside him rolled her eyes at the bald man. Python monk, don't think too much. If you were 20 years younger, maybe I would consider it. With your current conduct, you'd better not be a toad trying to eat a swan. The bald man laughed. Ha 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 ha, Bloodbat, even if you let me do it, I might not dare. Who doesn't know that you're a famous snake and scorpion? The number of men you've sucked dry must be at least 80, if not 100. I still want to live for a few more years. The woman laughed. Stop talking nonsense. Hurry up and finish your work. Take the reward and leave. Our employer this time is horrifying. I'm afraid he's not a good person. At this point, the woman suddenly sensed something and immediately pointed with her finger. Then, the blood bat behind her immediately flew up and pounced toward the old Taoist and the monkey demon who were watching from the corner of the wall. The person the employer said he wants to kill doesn't seem to be this Taoist. The bald man reminded her out of goodwill. The woman laughed. It's fine. Buy one get one free. The main thing is, my blood bat is thirsty. On the other side, the old Taoist looked at the blood bat flying toward him and trembled in fear. F***CK F***CK F***CK. I've really had 8 lifetimes of bad luck. He had only chased after them out of curiosity, only to see the fire wolf and white ape trap. The old Taoist had traveled extensively and was knowledgeable. He knew that the white ape had offended someone powerful, so he didn't think of helping. It wasn't that he was timid, but that the old Taoist wasn't very capable. Other than some of the Cloud Sect's inheritance and living off of his savings, he didn't even have a pet beast. The monkey demon was only a rank 2. He could be talkative, but he couldn't be counted on to put his life on the line. As expected, the old Taoist turned his head and the monkey demon had already scrambled to the side. Evil disciple! The old Taoist stomped his feet in anger. However, he had no other choice but to bleed profusely. Otherwise, he might not even be able to keep his life. He took out a talisman and chanted, "The wind from the 9 continents, the talisman enters the throat of the god. Urgent." After saying that, he opened his mouth and swallowed the talisman. Then, he blew at the bloodbat. Chapter 250. The old Taoist priest's breath seemed ordinary, but it was not. As soon as he exhaled, a vortex immediately formed, wrapping around the bloodbat. Despite its massive size, the bloodbat couldn't break free from the vortex's restraint. Seeing that he had succeeded, old Taoist immediately fled. It wasn't that he didn't want to be loyal. After all, he wasn't familiar with White Ape yet. Moreover, he knew his own capabilities. He might be able to deal with regular people, but not Bloodbat. Having traveled the martial world for more than a decade, old Taoist had seen all kinds of storms and was knowledgeable. Naturally, he had heard of this group of villainous experts. The villainous community had its own rules. There was no capital for villainous people, and each province had its own ranking. This Bloodbat was a famous villainous expert in the central continent. The same went for the monk who controlled the python. In fact, his ranking was even higher than this Bloodbat. Among the most wicked people in the world, he could be ranked in the top 20. Old Taoist naturally didn't dare to provoke existences like them because both of them had rank 4 pet beasts. Old Taoist had some skills, but he didn't have a pet beast of his own. The monkey demon disciple he had taken in was only rank 2. Although he could speak and had cultivated a shape-shifting technique, he didn't have any offensive skills. Hence, running was the right choice. But even though he wanted to, the other party wouldn't let him. The blood-bat woman's expression turned cold. Invoking a spell, her pet beast immediately expanded and glowed with a crimson light. In an instant, it broke through the restraints of the vortex and fanned out a strong gust of wind, sending Old Taoist tumbling a few dozen feet away. Old Taoist was dazed from the fall and his head was bruised. He lay on the ground for a long time, unable to get up. Seeing that the blood bat was about to pounce on him, Old Taoist shouted, "My life is over." Just then, a rock flew over and struck the blood bat's head, shattering it. Then came the second and the third. The one who threw the rock was the monkey demon. Old Taoist mused, "At least this evil disciple still has a conscience." The old Taoist could see that things were not going to end well. It was obvious that the other party wanted to silence them. Furthermore, the old Taoist had sharp eyes. In the yard, the most powerful beast was the rank 4 firewolf, but now it was being restrained by a jade dragon. Needless to say, the jade dragon was also rank 4. This was the Jade Dragon Kingdom, so it wasn't strange to have a Jade Dragon here. But the problem was that this Jade Dragon was with a villainous expert. This meant that they were officials who wanted to deal with the Firewolf and White Ape. This wasn't going to be easy. Based on Old Taoist's personality, he would never get involved in such matters. But now, he had to get involved even if he didn't want to. Most importantly, the blood bat didn't seem to have any intention of letting him go. The old Taoist was not a kind person. He had done good things, but he had also done evil things. Now that someone wanted his life, how could he sit still and wait for death? "I don't want to die yet." Old Taoist steeled himself and took out a wrinkled talisman. That talisman appeared to be very ordinary. However, one could see that there was a row of characters written on it. Those characters were written with vigor and contained an air of righteousness. There is a dragon in the Thunder Lock, and he is called a saint. There is a sound from his belly drum, and he can control lightning and thunder. The old Taoist gritted his teeth as he recited the edict. The reason was simple. This was a lightning talisman. There was only one in the entire cloud sect. Once he used it, it would be gone. Old Taoist treated this talisman like a treasure. Even if he was in danger, he wouldn't take it out. Today's situation was clearly life-threatening. If he didn't use it, he would lose his life. Between life and death, there was no need to think too much about which to choose. Hence, Old Taoist used it even though his heart was bleeding. In the next instant, a bolt of lightning struck the blood bat. The sound was loud, but it was weaker than Old Taoist expected. He thought it would be a bolt of lightning. Speaking of which, this was his first time using it. He had only heard about it from the elders in the monastery. He didn't expect this lightning talisman to be so childish. But even if it was weak, it was still a bolt of lightning. The blood bat was immediately struck to the ground. Electric arcs crackled around its body, and a large part of its body was charred. Even though this lightning talisman wasn't that powerful, it was enough to inflict unbearable pain on the blood bat, rendering it immobile for a moment. Not far away, the woman on the rooftop was startled. That bolt of lightning clearly wasn't summoned with the pet beast's power, as it carried a tremendous amount of power. It was a spell. An orthodox Taoist spell. The woman's instinctive reaction was fear and dread. But she quickly came to her senses. Because she saw Old Taoist's wretched appearance, he must have used an external force instead of a powerful one. Otherwise, that bolt of lightning wouldn't have been so weak. "How dare you hurt my pet beast? I'll make sure you die a horrible death." The woman roared angrily and cast a spell. She grabbed a cow from somewhere and threw it over. Seeing this, the blood bat flew over and opened its mouth. The cow's blood was sucked dry in an instant. The burns on the blood bat's body also healed quickly. Old Taoist shuddered at the sight. He was out of ideas now. Even his most powerful lightning talisman couldn't do anything. He was truly out of ideas. He couldn't win, nor could he run. He could only wait for death. In the royal capital, there was an inconspicuous and unknown tea-house. Although its business wasn't that great, it was definitely an established shop that had been open for several years. Huji Tea House. The owner's surname was Hu. He was an old man with no ambitions. When business was good or bad, he would set up his stall regardless of the weather. And now, old Hu was a little afraid. Not because of any other reason. Since yesterday, 4 strange people had been sitting at his stall. Not all of them were strange. One of them looked like a scholar, which was considered normal. Oh right, there was also a beautiful woman carrying a swaddle. She didn't seem to be a problem either. Especially the beautiful woman's appearance. TSK, she was definitely the most beautiful woman old who had ever seen. She was many times better than the sallow old woman in his house. As for the other 2, one looked like a fiend while the other was even more terrifying. He wore thick clothes and was tall and exuded a strange smell. Beside him was a coffin. Which normal person would bring a coffin with them? But the problem was, after these 4 people sat on the long bench for an entire day and night, something was wrong. Even the scholar and the beautiful woman carrying the swaddle were no different from normal people in old Hu's eyes. Fortunately, these 4 people didn't do anything. They just sat there. The scholar was even sipping his tea. As for the other 3, the beautiful woman would occasionally tease the child while the other 2 were no different from statues. They didn't make a sound or say a word. Boss Hu was under a lot of pressure. His only consolation was that these 4 people were very generous. The money they gave yesterday was enough to cover his monthly income. So, if they wanted to sit, he would let them. Chapter 251. Old Man Who Was Glad to Have Some Peace and Quiet. However, a sudden clap of thunder in broad daylight scared the old man out of his wits. Why is there thunder in broad daylight? Old Man Who mumbled. Looking up at the sky, there weren't any dark clouds. What surprised Old Man Who was that the 4 people who were initially seated had all stood up. Scholar said, "Thunder in broad daylight. Something must be wrong. Shall we go take a look?" Another person said, "Curator told us to wait here." Scholar, don't be a busybody. That's not right. Scholar retorted, Old Black, think about it. If Curator's disciple doesn't show up, are we just going to keep waiting? As the saying goes, plans can never keep up with changes. Something might have gone wrong, so we can't just wait here. The man called Old Black also felt that it made sense. At that moment the beautiful woman spoke up, Scholar has a point. How about this? We'll split into 2 groups. One group will stay here to wait for Curator's disciple, while the other group will go take a look. That's a good idea. Old Black nodded. Scholar was the first to stand up. I'll go. There was no doubt that the coffin-carrying man would not go, and if he stayed, it would be the same as staying with the coffin-carrying man. Last time, the scholar had been irritated enough, so this time, he would not stay alone with the coffin-carrying man. I'll go. Black Crow could tell what Scholar was thinking. Now that he brought evil Scholar to the Jade Dragon Kingdom, he couldn't let Scholar be controlled again. The beautiful woman was none other than Madame Ghost Child. She nodded in agreement. As for Coffin Man, he didn't say a word. With that, Evil Scholar and Black Crow got up and headed towards the direction of the thunder. The 4 of them had arrived yesterday, and after asking around, they finally found Huji Tea House. They met up with the others and waited until now. After the Scholar and Black Crow walked out, they immediately used a technique to fly up and walk on the roof. At the same time, Evil Scholar used some unknown technique to conceal himself. This way, the people below could not see them. Old Black, do you think I'll be able to meet the Curator this time? Scholar asked with anticipation. He had heard too many legends about the Curator from Black Crow and had long been itching to meet him. Hence, when Evil Scholar said he wanted to come to Jade Dragon City, he came without hesitation. I can't guarantee that. We might not be able to meet him. Black Crow was very conservative with his words. After all, the one coming to meet us this time is the curator's disciple. Disciple? That's fine too. I heard that the curator's disciple is quite extraordinary as well. I wonder if he could give me some pointers on the advancement of my white cat? Evil Scholar asked expectantly. The two of them were extremely fast, and as they spoke, they had already arrived. As soon as he arrived, he saw a 3-meter-long blood bat sucking the blood of a cow. The scene was bloody and frightening. Oh my, isn't this the B*TCH blood bat? Evil Scholar said. They were all experts of the evil path, and many of them had met before. Even if they hadn't met before, they had heard of them, especially experts like Bloodbat. She was ranked just below Black Crow and could be considered quite famous. That giant bloodbat was her trademark. Black Crow didn't say a word. He swept a glance at Bloodbat and Python Monk, then at the Firewolf being restrained by a rank 4 Jade Dragon in the yard. He immediately frowned. Old Yi mentioned that the curator's disciple's pet beast is a rank 4 Firewolf. Among Firewolves, only a handful have the potential to evolve into rank 4. Could this one be the curator's disciple's pet beast? Black Crow immediately came up with a guess. Is this one the curator's disciple's pet beast? A thought popped into Black Crow's mind. Whether it was or not, there was always a possibility. At this, Black Crow snorted. His voice was not loud, but it was exceptionally clear at this moment. Python Monk and Bloodbat immediately sensed it. They turned their heads to look, and their expressions changed. Especially Bloodbat. She immediately controlled her pet beast to fly back to her side, not even attacking the old Taoist. Because relatively speaking, Black Crow and Evil Scholar's appearance made her extremely wary. This was much more important than dealing with the old Taoist. After all, she had no idea why these two were here. Among the villainous experts, Black Crow was undoubtedly ranked higher than Python Monk and Bloodbat, but not by much. As for Evil Scholar, he wasn't ranked highly among the villainous experts. After all, his pet beast was only rank 3. However, Evil Scholar was quite famous too. The situation suddenly became awkward. The villainous experts Python Monk and Bloodbat were looking at Black Crow while Black Crow was also looking at the two villainous experts. Evil Scholar was looking at this strange scene, wondering if the legendary curator was here. He immediately spotted the battered old Taoist with blood all over his head. No doubt, this person was far from the image of an expert he had in mind. Definitely not. But there was no one else. After a brief silence, someone broke it. Bloodbat giggled. What day is it today? Why are all the villainous experts here? Black Crow, what is an expert like you doing here? Why don't you tell us first? Bloodbat may seem relaxed, but she was actually very cautious. She had to first figure out Black Crow's purpose, whether he was a friend or foe, or if it was just a coincidence that he appeared here. As Bloodbat spoke, Python Monk was also on high alert. It was obvious that he was ready to take action at any time if anything unexpected happened. Against Evil Scholar and Black Crow, he and Bloodbat had a higher chance of winning. Or rather, he had a 90% chance of winning. Hence, while he was wary, it wasn't to the extent of being afraid. Evil Scholar definitely wouldn't answer this question. He turned to Black Crow to see what he had to say. Although Evil Scholar wasn't very capable and his pet beast was only rank 3, he wasn't afraid. Not at all, because besides him and Black Crow, there were the even more terrifying Madam Ghost Child and Coffin Man in the city. Black Crow sneered and pointed at Xiaohua. You guys can't touch this Firewolf. His words were simple and concise. However, Bloodbat and Python Monk's expressions immediately changed. So they're here for trouble. Strike first and gain the upper hand. Bloodbat and Python Monk exchanged glances and immediately made the first move. The vampire bat immediately lunged at Black Crow. At the same time, Python Monk shouted, "Mr. Jade, if you don't make a move now, we won't be able to hold on much longer." As soon as he said that, a few more jade dragons flew out. However, they were all rank 3 instead of rank 4. Even so, rank 3 was enough to make a huge difference at this critical juncture. At the very least, Evil Scholar was immediately suppressed to the point where he couldn't move. On the other side, the Black Falcon was already locked in a fierce battle with the vampire bat. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand. Let's end this quickly before anything else happens. A person flew up from afar and landed beside Bloodbat and Python Monk. This person wore a cloak and a long hat that covered his face. The jade dragon trapping Xiaohuo was obviously under his control. Other than that, he also had a flag in his hand. With a wave of the flag, the rank 3 jade dragons attacking Evil Scholar became even more ferocious. Evil Scholar was in grave danger. This is preposterous. Evil Scholar's face was filled with murderous intent. A cornered dog would jump over a wall, and a person could do anything when they were cornered. Moreover, the title of Evil Scholar, was not just for show. The white cat beside him grew in size, attacking left and right. Evil Scholar took out a grappling hook and worked with the white cat to defend against the jade dragons. Whenever an opportunity presented itself, he would slash and stab the jade dragons in a frenzy. Chapter 252. However, no matter how ferocious Evil Scholar was, he was at a natural disadvantage due to his lack of strength. After being attacked by several rank 3 jade dragons, his body was soon covered in wounds. Black Crow was focusing all his attention on Bloodbat, so he couldn't split his attention. Both sides were barely able to maintain a stalemate, even though this balance could be broken at any moment. "Old Black, think of something, or my life will end here," Evil Scholar shouted. He really could not hold on any longer. In the underworld, he was a good cook, a good storyteller, and knowledgeable. These were his strengths, but he couldn't fight. His white cat wasn't too powerful either, so he was barely holding on. He was no match for an expert like Black Crow. According to Evil Scholar, those at Black Crow's level were all freak. But now, he was fighting against a freak. Who could stand against that? Black Crow was getting anxious. However, Bloodbat wasn't weak either. Her pet beast was also a rank 4 and had incredible recovery abilities. If he was given more time, he was confident he could defeat her. But for now, the outcome of the battle wouldn't be decided. "Scholar, hold on a little longer. The battle here is quite loud. Ghost Child and Coffin Man must have noticed it. Either one of them will be able to overwhelm the other." Black Crow's voice wasn't soft. Not only was he speaking to Evil Scholar, but he was also speaking to Bloodbat and Python Monk's group. This was called psychological warfare. Sure enough, Python Monk's expression changed at his words. Ghost Child? Coffin Man? If it was someone else, they really might not have heard of it. But they were all from the Corrupt Path, and they were in the top 20 of the Corrupt Path. How could they not know each other? Even if he hadn't seen him before, his name was like a thunderclap piercing through his ears. There was no doubt that both Ghost Child and Coffin Man were existences that he and Bloodbat couldn't afford to offend, especially Madame Ghost Child. Back in South Continent, she was someone who could stop a child from crying. She was a terrifying existence that even villainous experts wouldn't dare to provoke. In fact, quite a number of villainous experts had died in Madame Ghost Child's hands. Python Monk urged with an ugly expression. Bloodbat didn't look too good either. She knew how terrifying those two were. If it was really as Black Crow said, that even someone like Madame Ghost Child was here, then they should run immediately. Their employer, the man in the cloak and tall hat, smirked. "How could you believe a scam like this? Whether it's real or not, let's kill these people first. Then, we won't have to be afraid even if experts show up. Also, don't forget, this is Jade Dragon Kingdom." His voice was filled with absolute confidence. Although this person had never revealed his identity, judging from the fact that he could control a jade dragon, this person was most likely an official of the Jade Dragon Kingdom. Not to mention, he was quite influential too. Python Monk and Blood Bat had an innate advantage over the others. Since that's the case, let's go all out. Python Monk grinned maliciously and played his flute again. The python's strangling white ape grew thicker. Not only that, more than 10 small garland snakes as thick as fingers slithered out from Python Monk's sleeves. After these snakes emerged, Python Monk looked as if he had aged more than 10 years in an instant. In the next instant, these snakes pounced on Old Taoist, Black Crow, and Evil Scholar. Be careful, these snakes are poisonous. Black Crow's pupils constricted when he saw this, and he used all his strength to control the Black Falcon. However, the Blood Bat was also surrounded by a bloody mist, and its speed doubled. It entangled the Black Falcon, making it unable to split its attention. In the distance, at Hu Tea House, sensing something, Ghost Child stood up and looked in the direction where Black Crow and Evil Scholar went. After a moment of thought, she turned to Coffin Man and gave him an order. Old Coffin, stay here. If Curator's disciple comes, remember to be respectful. I feel something's off over there. I'll go check it out. After saying that, Ghost Baby's figure flashed and disappeared without a trace. The Coffin Man nodded to himself and turned to look at Old Hu. The latter was very concerned and did not even dare to breathe loudly, hoping that the strange man would leave as soon as possible. Python Monk's dozen little snakes were already in front of Black Crow and the others. The situation suddenly became perilous. Just then, Madame Ghostchild arrived. Carrying her swaddle, she scanned her surroundings. Although she didn't know what was going on, there was no need to know at a time like this. All she had to do was attack. Seeing Madame Ghostchild, Evil Scholar and Black Crow were delighted. Evil Scholar was initially afraid of Madame Ghostchild, but at this moment, he felt that Madame Ghostchild was as close to him as the Bodhisattva in his temple. He was happy and worried at the same time. Python Monk and Blood Bat were shocked to see Madame Ghostchild. Had it been any other day, they would be terrified if they encountered Madame Ghostchild, let alone now. They were practically using all their strength and had no strength left. Now that Madame Ghostchild was here, they were at their wits' end. Even their employer, the mysterious man in the tall hat, was taken aback. However, he was quick-witted enough to shout, Madame Ghostchild of South Continent, Black Crow and Evil Scholar of West Continent, why are villainous experts like you interfering in the affairs of our Jade Dragon Kingdom? This has nothing to do with you. Don't cause trouble for yourselves and leave now. He was obviously giving them a way out. However, Madame Ghostchild was an eccentric person. If she wanted to take action, she would never discuss it with others. Moreover, she disdained doing so. Just like now, she walked towards them as if she didn't hear the man's words. Although it was just a few slow steps, Python Monk and the others felt immense pressure. Suddenly, a dragon's roar came from the direction of the Dragon Temple. Strangely, only Madame Ghostchild could hear it. In an instant, Madame Ghostchild's expression changed and she stopped in her tracks. A rank 5 dragon. Madame Ghostchild sensed a powerful force from the dragon's roar. It was a warning, a blatant warning. Madame Ghostchild could no longer keep her cool. If there was a rank 5 dragon, even if she and Coffin Man joined forces, they still wouldn't stand a chance. Under normal circumstances, if it wasn't related to core interests, the safest course of action would be to retreat. At the very least, they could avoid a conflict with the rank 5 dragon. However, Madame Ghostchild didn't retreat immediately. She looked at Black Crow, asking for his opinion. After all, Madame Ghostchild had no idea what happened here. But if someone like Black Crow decided to get involved, there must be a reason. Black Crow didn't hear the dragon's roar either. But judging from Madame Ghostchild's reaction, there had to be something that made her so fearful. Hence, Black Crow immediately shouted, "That fire wolf over there might be the pet beast of Curator's disciple." Upon hearing this, Madame Ghostchild understood why Black Crow was involved in this matter. She looked at the fire wolf restrained by a rank 4 jade dragon. She knew that if this fire wolf belonged to Curator's disciple, she had to intervene. Even if she had to deal with a rank 5 dragon, she couldn't back down. Chapter 253. Madame Ghostchild trusted Black Crow, so there was no need for verification. She patted the swaddle in her arms, and a piercing shriek was heard. Moments later, a silhouette carrying a coffin landed heavily, shattering the ground and sending dust into the air. Madame Ghostchild must have brought Coffin Man here as well. At this moment, Python Monk and Bloodbat's expressions were extremely ugly. Sure enough, Evil Scholar's prediction was true. Madame Ghostchild and Coffin Man were here as well. With this, they had no hope of winning. Unless they had stronger reinforcements, they wouldn't stand a chance. Even one expert with a rank 4 pet beast wouldn't be enough. They would need at least 2. The current situation was no less than a war between intermediate countries. Forget them, even the masked man with the tall hat was stunned. He clearly didn't expect things to escalate. If it was just Black Crow and Evil Scholar, things would still be manageable. But now that Madame Ghostchild and Coffin Man were here as well, even he wouldn't be able to handle the situation. Subconsciously, the man turned to look at the Jade Dragon Temple. It seemed like he had a pillar of support there. However, no one noticed that after Madame Ghostchild and Coffin Man arrived, a person was rapidly approaching them. As he approached, Xiao Hor, who had been suppressed by the rank 4 Jade Dragon all this while, sensed something and became agitated. He began to resist, flames surging all over his body. The rank 4 Jade Dragon was overflowing with frost energy, and it seemed like it was struggling to hold it back. The next instant, a person landed and tossed a small flag into the air. That little flag was golden in color, and there were many pictures of nebulas on it. Resplendent flowing light flowed out, and the moment it flew out, it disappeared without a trace like an illusion. However, the instant the little golden flag disappeared, the surrounding environment seemed to have changed slightly. But upon closer inspection, nothing seemed to have changed. Only Madame Ghostchild's pupils dilated as she mumbled to herself, "This is the nebula barrier." By then, the newcomer had arrived at the scene. He was wearing a demon mask, and behind him was the silhouette of a steel door that exuded a domineering aura. Madame Ghostchild and Black Crow were extremely familiar with this aura. They immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, Curator." It was obviously Lin Jin. For the past 2 days, he had been cooped up inside the Museum of Deadly Beasts, leaning against the Curator's door of the visitation hall, studying the nebula barrier. He was so focused on his studies that he forgot to eat or sleep. For the past 2 days, he hadn't had a single drop of water. Most importantly, Lin Jin didn't even notice that 2 days had passed. He was so immersed in cultivating the nebula barrier that he couldn't extricate himself from. Lin Jin's gains over the past 2 days were tremendous. With Black Crow's ancient spell manual and the nebula flag he obtained from the old dragon, Lin Jin actually managed to learn something from it. Although it might only be a tiny bit of cultivation, it was still an orthodox Taoist technique. And so, for the next 2 days, Lin Jin used his spell and psyche to refine this flag, imbuing it with the aura of the Visitation Hall and the Museum of Deadly Beasts. He didn't expect that the flag would turn golden after being tainted by a spell. Lin Jin himself had learned the basics of the nebula barrier. Back then, he had wanted to continue his studies, but when he looked up, he realized that a lot of time had passed. There was an hourglass inside the Museum of Deadly Beasts, so Lin Jin realized that he had been inside for 2 whole days. This had never happened before. Lin Jin didn't think too much about it. He immediately jumped out of the museum and returned to Jade Dragon City. Immediately, He sensed Xiaohua's whereabouts and hurried over. When he saw the situation, he took out the golden flag and cast the nebula barrier to seal off the area. Of course, Lin Jin wasn't afraid of anyone escaping. He just wanted to seal off the area so that he could communicate with the Museum of Deadly Beasts and borrow its power. Right now, he was standing there, wearing a demon mask and the curator's door of the visitation hall looming behind him. His aura was terrifying, and anyone could tell that this man was an expert. Lin Jin's entrance immediately shocked the crowd. Evil Scholar and Coffin Man were both excited. Surprisingly, Coffin Man was the first to react. As Madame Ghostchild bowed, he took a step forward and knelt down to pay his respects. Others like Evil Scholar only admired and worshipped the curator, but Coffin Man was different. Even his life was saved by the curator. If it weren't for the curator's guidance to Madame Ghostchild, Coffin Man would have died several days ago. Hence, since the curator and he had a lifesaver, it was only natural for him to pay his respects. Although Lin Jin had never met Coffin Man and Evil Scholar before, he could recognize them at a glance from Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild's descriptions. On this side were familiar faces. On the other side, Lin Jin immediately spotted Xiaohua, who was restrained by a jade dragon. He frowned. It was a jade dragon again. Although this jade dragon wasn't the old dragon, Lin Jin was already displeased. Now that he had come out, he was ready to teach that old dragon a lesson, so he didn't hold back. With a flick of his wrist, a silver needle flew out. It was 10 times faster and more powerful than before. Even Lin Jin was startled by this. The silver needle pierced through the jade dragon's body. Driven by the immense destructive force, the needle flew out from the side of the jade dragon's body, leaving a bloody hole the size of a thumb. Blood splattered everywhere. The jade dragon let out a pained cry as it lost all its strength. Xiaohua also seized the opportunity and suddenly burst out a ball of flames. He flipped over and bit down on the jade dragon's neck. In an instant, he had actually bitten off the head of the rank 4 jade dragon. Everyone was horrified by this scene, especially the man in the tall hat. He let out a blood-curdling scream and spat out a mouthful of blood. Needless to say, that rank 4 jade dragon was his pet beast. Now that it was killed on the spot, it must have suffered a severe backlash as well. Wearing a mask, Lin Jin looked surprised. He didn't expect to injure the jade dragon so badly, giving Xiaohua a chance to retaliate. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin figured out what was going on. It was the nebula barrier technique that had strengthened his cultivation. That was why the coiled wire needle was so powerful. In short, this move immediately stunned everyone. On the other side, Python Monk immediately withdrew his giant python, while Bloodbat also recalled his vampire bat. The two of them were already filled with fear and had thoughts of retreating. The man in the tall hat came back to his senses, but he was still trembling. Perhaps it was because of the backlash from the sudden death of his pet beast, or perhaps it was because of his anger. After all, that was a rank 4 pet beast and a precious jade dragon at that. How dare you kill my pet beast? I will never forgive you. The man bellowed, venting his anger. With the death of the rank 4 jade dragon, the remaining rank 3 jade dragons instantly lost control and scattered in all directions. However, once they were far away, they couldn't escape no matter how hard they tried. It was as if there was an invisible wall imprisoning them. At this, Python Monk and Bloodbat panicked. This expert who appeared out of nowhere was too ridiculous. They had no idea how he managed to injure the rank 4 jade dragon so severely. Although this expert didn't directly kill the jade dragon, anyone could tell that if this expert hadn't intervened, the fire wolf wouldn't have been able to kill the jade dragon. Xiaohua naturally sensed Lin Jin's blood contract power, but Lin Jin had given him an order, so Xiaohua didn't approach him. As for White Ape, without the blood contract power, Lin Jin's aura was completely the curator's. Even White Ape couldn't recognize him. His face was filled with awe, not daring to approach him. Chapter 254. It was the same for everyone else's pet beast. The nebula barrier was connected to the Museum of Deadly Beasts and the Visitation Hall. Although he could only borrow a tiny bit of the curator's aura, it was enough to grant Lin Jin unrivaled strength. Just like now, with the demon mask on, no one dared to oppose him. Curator? I've heard of that name. Python Monk's face was pale. He didn't dare to make any sudden movements, and so did Bloodbat. I've seen this name in the Villainous Society's newspaper some time ago. He was the one who ordered Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild to do things. I thought he was a scammer, but now it seems like there really is such a powerful person. Python Monk's voice trembled as he said this. They were villainous experts. None of them were idiots to have survived until now. Who was Black Crow? Who was Madame Ghostchild? Both of them were prominent figures in the Villainous Society, but no one had ever heard of them bowing down to anyone or submitting to anyone. But now they were treating this masked man with utmost respect. And that wasn't all. A terrifying existence like Coffin Man had even knelt before him. The impact of this attack was quite huge, and coupled with the terrifying aura and the spell that sealed the surroundings, Python Monk and Bloodbat were terrified at the first moment. It wasn't just them. Their pet beasts reacted the same way. The curator had the ability to intimidate beasts. As long as they weren't rank 4, he could easily make these pet beasts kneel. Both the spotted python and Bloodbat were cowering behind their owners, trembling in fear. These were rank 4 pet beasts, but they were so terrified. One could only imagine how terrifying this curator was. He definitely couldn't fight. Anyone with a brain would know that fighting at this moment would be courting death. Both of them were filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have come no matter how much money they were offered. At this moment, their employer wanted to run away. The man was a rank 4 jade dragon. Although he had cursed the fire wolf to death in a fit of rage, he quickly regained his composure. Given the current situation, they were already at a disadvantage. Without his rank 4 jade dragon, he couldn't control the other rank 3 jade dragons at all. Python Monk and Bloodbat couldn't be counted on either. They already didn't have the strength to fight anymore. If they didn't leave now, they might be finished. Thus, this person decisively turned around and ran. He had only taken a few steps when he was stopped by Evil Scholar. Just now, Evil Scholar was injured. He was covered in blood and his clothes were tattered. It was a miserable sight. Evil Scholar was a man who cared a lot about his appearance. One could imagine how furious he was right now. Seeing that the culprit was trying to escape, Evil Scholar immediately controlled the white cat to pounce on him. Its eyes widened, its blood-stained face filled with malevolence. "How dare you run, you be **starred. I'll kill you!" Evil Scholar attacked with his claws while the white cat attacked with its claws and fangs. No matter how capable the man was, his pet beast had been killed, so he couldn't be that strong himself. Soon, Evil Scholar finished him off. When Black Crow saw this, he said, "Scholar, don't kill indiscriminately in front of curator." This was a warning. Evil Scholar was startled, but since the man was already dead, he went over and bowed at Lin Jin. "Curator, I've heard a lot about you. I was reckless just now. Please forgive me, curator." Evil Scholar was very polite at this time. Lin Jin obviously didn't blame him. Lin Jin had learned who Evil Scholar was from Black Crow. Lin Jin was indebted to Evil Scholar for his help last time. Although Lin Jin had written an evaluation report for Evil Scholar's white cat, so they didn't owe each other anything, Evil Scholar had come all the way here to help Lin Jin. Moreover, Lin Jin knew that the man with the tall hat must be an enemy, one of the old dragon's men. Hence, Lin Jin killed him. "It's fine. Let's see who that man is," Lin Jin said. Evil Scholar immediately went over and removed the mask and hat from the dead man's face. Lin Jin's heart skipped a beat. It was him? Jade Dragon Kingdom's Minister Yu. Lin Jin gave it some thought and realized that this was normal. After all, there were only a handful of people in Jade Dragon Kingdom who could own a rank 4 Jade Dragon pet beast. Minister Yu was a man of high status in Jade Dragon Kingdom. It wasn't strange for him to own a Jade Dragon pet beast. Moreover, Minister Yu's surname was Yu, and so was the old dragon. They might be related somehow. But no matter what, Minister Yu was dead. Lin Jin knew that things wouldn't end well today. Minister Yu definitely didn't have the authority to seal off the palace. Perhaps even the Emperor of Jade Dragon Kingdom was involved. Lin Jin didn't expect things to escalate to this extent. But no matter what, the old dragon had to die. It was for his own sake and also to save He Yu. Only with the old dragon's death could He Yu's curse be lifted. Lin Jin fell into deep thought. But because he was wearing the demon mask, no one knew what he was doing. They could only wait in silence. Meanwhile, Python Monk and Bloodbat were like startled birds at the sight of their employer's death. Python Monk, what do we do? Bloodbat was already panicking. The 3 Jade Dragons were still charging around out of control, but 100 feet away, they seemed to be trapped and couldn't get out. Don't panic, don't panic. Stay calm. Python Monk was sweating profusely. He stole a glance at the curator and coincidentally, the curator was looking at him too. Lin Jin was wondering, what are these two here for? They must be helpers hired by Minister Yu. If he was a helper, then why did he just stand there, not fighting or running away after he arrived? Also, when Evil Scholar killed Minister Yu, the two of them didn't seem to do anything. That was strange. Hence, when Lin Jin glanced at them through the demon mask, Python Monk immediately misunderstood. It was true that he was a villainous expert who had killed countless people and committed all sorts of evil deed. People like him were usually desperados, but Python Monk was exceptionally afraid of death. In the beginning, he was indeed a desperado. But as he grew older, he no longer thought that way. Now, he cherished his life even more. Now that they were on the brink of death, the curator might even be thinking of ways to silence them. Hence, Python Monk decisively knelt on the ground and kowtowed, begging for mercy. Bloodbat gritted her teeth at this. She still had some pride left in her. She knew that if she were the curator, she wouldn't let her enemy off even if they were to kneel and beg for mercy. Hence, rather than waiting for death, she might as well take a gamble. Moreover, Bloodbat was confident that her pet beast had a unique ability. Perhaps it could use that ability to break free. Immediately, Bloodbat made a hand seal, and the bat behind her immediately picked her up and flew to the side. Upon reaching the boundary, Bloodbat opened her mouth and spat out a blob of tainted blood. It instantly splashed onto the barrier wall, releasing a puff of corrosive air. It sounded like a pot of hot oil being poured onto a piece of meat. Whoosh! Lin Jin frowned. He could clearly feel the instability of the nebula barrier. He had to admit that the woman who could control the bat was quite capable. However, it was a pity that Lin Jin's nebula barrier wasn't just a spell. Because it was connected to the Museum of Deadly Beasts, the blob of tainted blood couldn't break through the barrier. The next instant, Bloodbat and her pet beast crashed into the barrier wall. Chapter 255. Due to her incredible speed, she fell from the impact. Vampire Bat was covered in blood and her wings were broken. Meanwhile, Vampire Bat's neck was crooked to the side. She was barely breathing. She actually died from the impact. Vampire Bat was too terrified and was in a hurry to escape. She was also overly confident in her corrosive blood, so she ended up in such a state. Now, Python Monk was the only one left. The bald man was trembling from head to toe. Witnessing Vampire Bat's tragic death, he cursed the woman inwardly. Earlier, there were two of them. Even if they were at a disadvantage, they still had some strength. But earlier, the woman was clearly planning to abandon him and escape on her own. In the end, she ended up killing herself. If she died, so be it. Now, he was the only one left. He was like a weak sheep in a pack of hungry wolves. Other than begging for mercy, Python Monk had no other choice. Black Crow, Ghost Child, and the others remained silent, waiting for the curator's command. Whether it was to kill or let go, they would obey the curator's orders unconditionally. Lin Jin made a grabbing motion in the air, and a small golden flag appeared in his hand. At the same time, the nebula barrier came into contact with him. "Break your blood contract and leave," Lin Jin said. Speaking of which, Lin Jin wasn't a bloodthirsty person. It would have been better if this man had resisted, but now that he was begging for mercy, it would be too cruel to kill him. After all, Lin Jin had taught Black Crow, Ghost Child, and the others not to kill indiscriminately in the visitation hall. Although he didn't intend to kill this man, he had to be punished. Breaking his blood contract was probably the most severe punishment. This was basically asking the man to give up on his pet beast. To experts nowadays, giving up on their pet beasts was equivalent to crippling their own cultivation. Sometimes it was worse than death. Hence, when Python Monk heard this, he shuddered and hesitated. However, he knew that this wasn't a choice he could make. Disobedience meant death. Compared to becoming an ordinary person in the future, death was still a little scary. Python Monk made up his mind almost immediately. Curator is famous, so I'm sure he wouldn't go back on his word. Alright, I, Python Monk, have done something wrong, so I have to pay the price. I admit it. Having said that, Python Monk performed a trick and broke his blood contract. Pow 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 pow. With a few explosions, Python Monk's body exploded into a bloody mist. Not only him, but his Type 4 spotted python's body also exploded into a bloody mist. This was breaking the blood contract. From now on, he would no longer be bound by a blood contract with his pet beast. The python seemed to have gained some sentience, so it knew what was going on. It glanced at Lin Jin fearfully before lowering its body, as if it was kowtowing. Then, it got up and slithered away, ignoring Python Monk. At this moment, Python Monk's face was pale. It was obvious that his vitality had been greatly damaged. "Let's go." Seeing how obedient Python Monk was, Lin Jin didn't make things difficult for him. Delighted, Python Monk quickly bowed and thanked Lin Jin before getting up and scurrying away, not daring to tarry any longer. On the other side, Evil Scholar said, "From now on, there are 2 less experts on the Corrupt Path's expert ranking." Haha, doesn't that mean my ranking has risen quite a bit? Black Crow had a helpless look on his face. Evil Scholar was loyal to his friends, but he had a loose tongue. Curator was still around, yet he dared to spout nonsense. Therefore, he could only glare as a warning. However, Lin Jin seemed to like Evil Scholar's personality. "What's your ranking on the Corrupt Path's expert ranking?" Lin Jin asked. This question was directed at everyone. Evil Scholar was the first to answer. "Curator, I'm not very capable and my pet beast is just SOSO, so I'm only ranked 54. However, with Python Monk's blood contract breaking and his blood bat killing itself, I should be ranked 52. Haha, maybe in a few days I'll be able to make it into the top 50. He was incredibly pleased with himself. Black Crow added, "I'm ranked 17th. Lin Jin turned to Madame Ghostchild and Coffin Man. Madame Ghostchild said, "Curator, I'm ranked 12th and Old Coffin is 15th. It was obvious that Evil Scholar was a far cry from these 3. Black Crow, Ghostchild, and Coffin Man were all experts in the top 20. Even Evil Scholar was a formidable opponent. However, this villainous expert ranking was full of hidden talent. Lin Jin knew how strong Ghostchild was. If it weren't for the curator's aura, he wouldn't be Ghostchild's match in terms of strength. After all, the babyface spider in Ghostchild's arms used to be a rank 5 pet beast. If that was the case, what kind of existence could be ranked in the top 10 of the villainous expert ranking? Lin Jin shook his head. He didn't feel like looking for trouble now. He had to eliminate that old dragon no matter what, so the more experts he had, the better. Before this, Lin Jin wouldn't have much confidence even with Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild's help. But now that he had a better understanding of the Nebula Barrier and condensed the Nebula Golden Flag, he was more confident in dealing with the old dragon. Now that Minister Yu was dead, the Jade Dragon Kingdom's emperor might come looking for trouble, so he had to settle things before that happened. Fortunately, Lin Jin was confident. Not only did he have villainous experts like Black Crow and Ghostchild with him, but he was also using the curator's identity. Even if he caused a huge problem, the curator would be the one to shoulder it. Lin Jin was still Lin Jin. However, as the curator's disciple, it would be difficult for Lin Jin to escape completely. Since he had things to do, he could just leave Jade Dragon Kingdom and go somewhere else. Now that he had people on his side, what was there to be afraid of? Just then, Lin Jin remembered that there was someone over there, so he looked over. His eyes met the old Taoist. The old Taoist was startled. He had been watching from the beginning, so he knew that the masked man was definitely a contemporary expert. Everything else aside, just this barrier alone wasn't something an average person could perform. The old Taoist mustered up his courage and went over to salute. Wu Qian of Mount Sky River's Cloud Sect greets the esteemed senior. It was a Taoist greeting. Lin Jin didn't know this old Taoist. While he was puzzled, he noticed the monkey demon next to White Ape. He immediately recognized the monkey demon as the one he met at the Royal Capital's Inn. Lin Jin frowned. However, it seemed like White Ape and the monkey demon had a good relationship. Lin Jin could even hear White Ape speaking human language. Lin Jin was petrified. After calling White Ape over, Lin Jin asked him about it and found out that the old Taoist had used an edict amulet to help White Ape refine his hyoid bone, allowing him to learn human language. White Ape still didn't recognize the masked man as Lin Jin, so he spoke to him respectfully. From White Ape's words, Lin Jin knew that this old Taoist was a friend and not a foe. He saluted him and said, "This White Ape is my disciple's disciple. Mr. Wu, you helped him refine his hyoid bone and even got yourself into this undeserved disaster. Allow me to give you a cultivation manual as a token of my apology." Having said that, he took out the Beast Energy Formation, Part 1, 3 he had written earlier and handed it to Wu Qian. At first, the old Taoist didn't want it, but after a glance, he obediently accepted it, his fingers trembling in excitement. He knew his stuff. Although it was just a glance, he could tell that it was a cultivation manual. Cultivators nowadays mainly focused on blood contract cultivation. To the old Taoist, that was putting the cart before the horse. Hence, he had never practiced blood contract cultivation, nor did he look for a pet beast. This curator before him clearly had a high cultivation level and powerful skills. Whatever he gave Wu Qian was definitely no ordinary item. "Old Taoist, I don't deserve it, I don't deserve it," the old Taoist said, but his hands didn't hesitate as he kept the item away. The monkey demon wanted to take a look, but the old Taoist didn't let him. Chapter 256. Old Taoist was satisfied with this cultivation method. He had given White Ape the Imperial Amulet to help him refine his hyoid bone so he could befriend the expert behind White Ape. At this moment, the person in front of him should be the master of an expert. He might even be the legendary Taoist immortal. The cultivation method bestowed by him was naturally no small matter. The old Taoist said that he felt ashamed to accept it. Firstly, it was out of politeness, and secondly, it was because he really felt ashamed to accept it. Old Taoist was a man of worldly experience and knew the ways of the world. He had been searching for the true path of cultivation for over 50 years and had devoted himself to it. However, the path of cultivation was hard to find. This had been the case since ancient times, let alone now when spirit energy and immortality were on the decline. Now that he had finally met a true expert who could use the nebula barrier, he had to seize this opportunity. How could he improve their relationship? Old Taoist thought for a moment before coming up with an idea. Curator's cultivation is profound and I, Wu Qian, have something to ask of you. I hope you can give me some pointers on cultivation, Old Taoist said respectfully. Lin Jin was in a hurry to get back at the old dragon, so after some thought, he said, Mr. Wu, please wait here for a moment. I'll come look for you after I'm done with something. Old Taoist nodded and retreated. Lin Jin obviously had to make haste. The commotion here was huge. Even if he used the nebula barrier to seal off the area, he couldn't completely seal off the news. By now, all the officials in Jade Dragon Kingdom should know about this. Time was of the essence. If Jade Dragon Kingdom's experts came to stop him, things would get messy. I'm going to slay an evil dragon. Would you all be willing to come with me? Lin Jin glanced at Black Crow, Madame Ghostchild, and the others. The four of them nodded. They were here because of the curator's summons. Forget slaying an evil dragon, even if he had to destroy Jade Dragon Kingdom, they wouldn't hesitate to help. Villainous experts didn't care that much. All right. Without further ado, Lin Jin led them straight to Jade Dragon Temple. As expected, the old dragon was hiding inside the temple. Meanwhile, Emperor He Qian was already aware of the chaos in the city. After all, the battle between rank 4 pet beasts and the thunder in broad daylight had caused a huge commotion. As the Emperor of Jade Dragon Kingdom, how could he not know about it? Just then, an internal guard hurried over to report the latest news. He Qian frowned when he saw it. Minister Yu is dead? This was no small matter. Minister Yu could be said to be the head of all the officials. He had a powerful background and even He Qian was wary of him. Most importantly, Minister Yu was extremely powerful and possessed a rank 4 Jade Dragon Beast. He could be said to be a pillar of support for the kingdom. Generally speaking, when Minister Yu was killed, this was no small matter. The culprit had to be apprehended and executed in public. However, He Qian did not give the order immediately. He asked the inner guard, "Does anyone else know about this?" The inner guard thought about it and nodded. "Sooner or later, the news will spread. Minister Yu's corpse has been found." He Qian nodded. "Order the city guards to immediately close the city gate. From this moment on, no one is allowed to enter or leave." Understood. The inner guard immediately went to carry out the task. He Qian shouted again, "Yao Xing! This servant is here." Head eunuch Yao Xing hurriedly walked over from the side and bowed, awaiting his orders. "Go get He Qi." Yao Xing's eyelids twitched at the order. However, he knew that this was not the time for hesitation. Hence, he immediately got to work. Soon, a middle-aged general in full armor entered the great hall and saluted He Qian. "General of the Jade Dragon Army, He Qi, greets your majesty." His voice was rich and mellow. It was obvious that he was a martial artist with a strong physique. "He Qi, I order you to gather all the soldiers under your command and have them wear armor and swords to protect the palace," He Qian instructed. He Qi obeyed and left. Be it the inner guard, head eunuch Yao Xing, or General He Qi, they were all He Qian's confidants. "Yao Xing, help me change." He Qian stood up and left. Yao Xing hurried to catch up, confused as to why the emperor suddenly wanted him to change. Yao Xing soon found out. The moment the emperor finished changing, many officials came to seek an audience with him. Although Yao Xing didn't dare to meddle in politics, he had eyes and ears everywhere. He knew that these officials were definitely from Minister Yu's faction. Moreover, it didn't take much to figure out that these officials wouldn't let the matter rest after finding out about Minister Yu's sudden death. Or perhaps they were here to figure out the situation. It was also possible that they were here to pledge their loyalty to the emperor. Yao Xing knew about the power struggle in the imperial court, but he would never get involved. The more one got involved, the faster one would die. By the time Yao Xing followed He Qian to the royal study, there were already more than 10 officials waiting there. There were also many generals among them. They were all in full armor but carried no weapons. Without He Qian's permission, no one was allowed to bring weapons into the palace. Your Majesty! When the officials saw He Qian, they immediately bowed. One of the generals stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, a brazen criminal has come to Jade Dragon City. How dare he kill Minister Yu on the streets? Your Majesty, please give the order to apprehend the criminal. At the general's words, more than half of the officials immediately knelt. Clearly, the fact that He Qian didn't give the order to apprehend the criminal after Minister Yu's death was enough to make Minister Yu's faction anxious. Hence, they came all the way here to force He Qian to give the order. However, there were also a few officials who didn't move. They were probably observing the situation and waiting for the right opportunity. Most of the officials knew what kind of power Minister Yu had. The people thought that the Emperor was supreme in Jade Dragon Kingdom, but that wasn't the case. Why was Jade Dragon Kingdom named after the Jade Dragon? Many of the officials were well aware of this. Every year, there would be 2 ceremonies in spring and autumn. Almost none of the officials who visited Jade Dragon Temple were absent, because they knew that the one who decided the fate of Jade Dragon Kingdom wasn't the Emperor, but the Jade Dragon deity in the temple. Minister Yu was the temple's representative. My dear ministers, I'm devastated by Minister Yu's death. I've ordered the city guards to lock down the city and apprehend the criminal. The situation is dire and I wanted to send someone to your residences to protect you, but since you're here, you may stay here for now. My dear ministers, don't worry. I can ensure your safety in the palace. Having said that, he stepped out. This caused the officials to be stunned. The situation wasn't what they expected. Just as they were about to chase after him, they were stopped by Great Eunuch Yao Xing. My dear ministers, His Majesty has given the order for all of you to have a good rest. It's a mess outside, so please don't run around. After saying that, he left as well. After that, over 100 imperial guards surrounded the imperial study room. The 10 or so officials were not stupid, they knew that they were being controlled. Some of the smarter ones knew that something big was about to happen today. After leaving, He Qian received a report from an internal guard about what was happening outside. Tell the city guards guarding the temple to retreat. Take my orders with you. Anyone who disobeys will be executed. He Qian said to one of the guards in charge of relaying the order. The guard immediately left with the order. Chapter 257. Outside, a gust of wind was blowing above Jade Dragon City. Thick clouds covered the sky. He Qian stood still and stared at the sky for the longest time. Yao Xing dared not disturb him. He ordered the other eunuchs to fetch a cloak before he personally draped it over He Qian's shoulders. Yao Xing, do you think that curator will be able to do this? He Qian asked. Yao Xing pondered for a moment before answering in a small voice. That curator is mysterious, so I can't say for sure. But Minister, you disobeyed your Majesty's orders and took matters into his own hands by hiring villainous experts to hunt down Lin Jin. That's how the curator managed to get involved. I heard that once the curator arrived, he immediately used his supernatural powers to seal off a large area. Those outside have no idea what's going on inside. He Qian shook his head. Of course I know he's an expert. I'm asking you if he can eliminate the dragon deity for me. Yao Xing knew he couldn't avoid this, so he could only say, 2 days ago, the dragon deity personally made a move. I heard he escaped with grievous injuries. After that, no one knew where Lin Jin went. I'm guessing that Lin Jin was also grievously injured. Back then, both he and the dragon deity were injured, which led to the mysterious curator's arrival. I believe that the moment the curator arrived, he executed a great technique and killed Minister Yu. He even had the ability to command a villainous expert like Madame Ghostchild to risk her life for him. That's why I believe the curator can eliminate the dragon divine. Ha ha ha, I think so too. That's why I'm taking such a risk, He Qian said. Yao Xing didn't understand, so he whispered, "Your Majesty, no matter who wins or loses, you can't be blamed. What risk is there?" He Qian chuckled. "Yao Xing, haven't you heard of this saying? It's called, out of the tiger's mouth into the wolf's den. I'm afraid that the curator will be the next dragon deity." Yao Xing's heart skipped a beat. He didn't dare to continue the conversation. When Lin Jin arrived at Jade Dragon Temple with Black Crow, Ghost Child, and the others, there were no longer any guards. There were even bloodstains on the ground. There should have been a battle just now. Interesting. The soldiers of Jade Dragon City are actually beating themselves up. That's strange. Evil Scholar went forward to investigate and immediately noticed something was amiss. Interesting. Then, he said, "Curator, looks like we don't have to worry about Jade Dragon Kingdom's officials anymore. Someone here hopes that we can help them get rid of that evil dragon." Evil Scholar was incredibly intelligent, so when he spoke, Lin Jin was no fool either. It only took him a moment to figure out what was going on. Moreover, he knew more about the Jade Dragon curse. He knew that the old dragon was actually the retired emperor of Jade Dragon Kingdom. How could the rightful emperor tolerate this? Previously, he did not dare to provoke Zhang Xian, but now that he saw an opportunity, he would definitely make use of it. Lin Jin didn't mind. After all, he wasn't doing this for His Majesty, whom he had never even met. Go! Lin Jin led the way into the temple. There were still some guards' corpses inside. They probably hadn't been able to drag them away in time. Lin Jin looked around. The temple was huge and had a simple yet elegant design. It was also filled with incense. However, he was here for trouble today, so even if it was a golden house, he had to tear it down. With a flip of his hand, he took out the nebula golden flag and tossed it into the air. Nebula as the boundary, fog seals the border. This time, he seemed to be able to cast the spell more smoothly than before. Once the barrier was activated, Lin Jin felt more confident. Everyone else's nebula barrier was just a simple barrier. But Lin Jin's nebula barrier was mainly used to communicate with the Museum of Deadly Beasts. It could be said that it was his biggest trump card. Without the nebula barrier, Lin Jin wouldn't have dared to come here. "Let's tear down this temple," Lin Jin suddenly said. He was sure that the old dragon knew they were here the moment they came in. However, the fact that the old dragon didn't come out meant that he was afraid. Who knew if there were any traps here? Hence, tearing it down was the easiest way. Upon receiving the order, Coffin Man charged forward with the coffin on his back. In the blink of an eye, 3 temples were smashed to pieces. Suddenly, a cold gust of air came from behind, heading straight for Coffin Man. The latter reacted quickly and used his coffin to block the attack. With a loud crack, half of the coffin was frozen over. Then, a roar came from Coffin Man's coffin and the lid opened up a little. A long shadow shot out like a whip, immediately collapsing half of the hall in front of it. In the middle of the collapsed hall stood an old man. It was that old dragon. At this moment, the old dragon's face was ashen and ugly. He was alone and had no helpers. Coffin Man knew that this was the main character, so he took a step forward. The old dragon immediately shouted, "Wait!" Having said that, he sized up Lin Jin. The current Lin Jin was wearing a demon mask and appeared as the curator. His every movement was the demeanor of an expert. There was no trace of the original Lin Jin at all. Hence, the old dragon didn't notice him at all. As for that Lin Jin, he should be your disciple. I can give him the rank 3 Jade Dragon Beast to help him form a blood pact again. With that, he would be 100 times stronger than that fire wolf. Let's bury the hatchet and both sides will be happy. What do you say? Lin Jin smiled and said, "Master, I have no grudge against you. I'm not even Lin Jin's mortal enemy, so why do you have to be so ruthless? Why don't we bury the hatchet and have a happy ending?" At this time, the old dragon directly showed weakness and even promised benefit. Admittedly, the benefits offered were impressive. A rank 3 jade dragon beast alone was a top-grade pet beast that many people yearned for. Since it was already rank 3 at the start, its future growth would be limitless. It would definitely be much stronger than the firewolf. Furthermore, how could a wolf beast be compared to a dragon beast? Truth be told, Lin Jin was tempted. But he couldn't agree to this. Xiaohu might not be talented, but he had accompanied Lin Jin all the way here, so Lin Jin couldn't just abandon him. Moreover, if he didn't kill this old dragon, Hiyu's curse wouldn't be removed. Sighing, Lin Jin was about to speak when the old dragon suddenly went berserk. This old dragon was extremely cunning. Having lived for several hundred years, he knew that this wasn't going to end well. He was just stalling for time while Lin Jin cast a spell from behind. Now that the other party was about to make a move, Lin Jin decided to strike first and gain the upper hand. Blizzard Winter, Frost Dragon Spirit. The old dragon instantly transformed into his dragon form, and a 300-foot-long dragon soared into the sky. His body was like jade, crystal clear. With a sweep of his tail, a cold gust of wind blew and a blizzard fell. Ha ha ha, the heavens are truly helping me by using the nebula barrier technique. Originally, it would be difficult for this old man to use a barrier after losing his magical treasure. Yet, you've managed to use it. This technique of mine is unable to disturb the weather outside. However, inside the barrier, it is extremely effective. Today, all of you shall die here. The old dragon's voice reverberated. In the blink of an eye, the blizzard came crashing down, freezing everyone's bones. Even experts like Black Crow and Ghost Child were caught in it. Their bodies stiffened as if their blood was about to freeze. Chapter 258. The Cold Wind Howled. Evil Scholar, who had the weakest cultivation and pet beast, was the first to succumb. As for the others, they were still fine. After all, they had rank 4 pet beasts to protect them so they wouldn't be frozen by the cold. Black Crow, Madam Ghost Child, and Coffin Man attacked at the same time. The Black Falcon soared into the air, a dark aura swirling around him. He let out a shrill cry, trying to intimidate the enemy. However, this tactic was useless against the old dragon. The latter continued to soar in the air, stirring up a blizzard with each flap. This kind of technique was truly marvelous. Unable to fly up, the Black Falcon was completely suppressed by the old dragon. They weren't even on the same level. The swaddle in Madam Ghost Child's arms let out a shrill cry. The next instant, several air blades flew out. The old dragon sneered, taking the attack head-on with his physical body. Although the air blades were strong, their power was greatly reduced beyond a certain distance. Moreover, the old dragon's scales were tough enough that the air blades could only leave a few shallow scratches on his skin from a distance of several hundred feet. Even Coffin Man was at his wits' end against the soaring dragon. Both he and his pet beast, Zombie Cthulhu, weren't adept at flying. The old dragon was clearly using his advantage to control the blizzard within the barrier to freeze people to death. Lin Jin obviously had his own methods. He could just contact the nebula barrier, but that wouldn't do anything to the old dragon. Moreover, if he did remove the barrier, the old dragon would most likely escape. If the old dragon escaped, they wouldn't be able to find him anytime soon and you would be in danger. This was probably the old dragon's plan. Lin Jin communicated with the Museum of Deadly Beasts. The next instant, the curator's door behind Lin Jin could vaguely be seen. With a creak, the door opened a sliver. Then, an invisible aura surged out along with a beam of light. In an instant, the blizzard the old dragon had conjured was shattered. In the blink of an eye, the blizzard had receded and the sun had risen. Things weren't as simple as they seemed. Lin Jin knew that the old dragon was severely injured. His coiled wire needle had destroyed one of the dragon's veins, so the old dragon was at the end of his tether. Lin Jin borrowed the aura that seeped out from the sliver and wrapped it around a coiled wire needle before shooting it out. The needle was tiny and hard to notice. The old dragon froze in the air before letting out a pained cry and spitting out blood. From the looks of it, he was severely injured. But no one noticed what happened just now. All they saw was a crack in the door behind Curator. Under the illumination of the light, the imposing old dragon collapsed. The Curator is indeed amazing. I don't think the Curator intends to take action personally this time. It's just that the old dragon is courting death by injuring the Curator's disciple. That's why the Curator has to show himself. This old dragon is courting death. Black Crow and Evil Scholar exchanged glances. They could read each other's thoughts from the look in their eyes. Ghost Baby and Coffin-Carrying Man had the same idea. At this moment, the Curator only needed to release a divine aura to severely injure the old dragon. Naturally, the Curator didn't need to do anything else. Coffin Man had already rushed forward and punched the old dragon. Although the old dragon was heavily injured, he still had the strength to fight back. However, against an expert like the Coffin-Carrying Man, he could only take a beating and was on the verge of death. Coffin Man was shrouded in a black aura and his bones were as tough as steel. He was very respectful to the Curator and knew when to stop. He immediately retreated. The old dragon no longer had the strength to resist, so the Curator would be the one to decide what to do next. Lin Jin took another look at Coffin Man. Coffin Man was very perceptive. When the old dragon fell, Coffin Man understood Lin Jin's intention and immediately went forward to cripple the old dragon. He must have used his zombie Cthulhu's power as well before retreating to let Lin Jin make the decision. What a clever man! Despite Coffin Man's cold, terrifying, and taciturn appearance, he was a thoughtful and intelligent man. Lin Jin nodded approvingly. Only then did Black Crow and the others snap out of their daze, musing about how fast Coffin Man was. They regretted not thinking of this earlier and letting Coffin Man seize the initiative. Judging by the Curator's expression, he was obviously pleased with Coffin Man. They had miscalculated. Now that the outcome was determined, Lin Jin strode toward the old dragon. Currently, the old dragon was curled up on the ground, barely breathing. Its jade scale armor was riddled with scars and blood kept gushing out of its mouth. It was a testament to the destructive power of Lin Jin's silver needle that was infused with energy. Of course, Lin Jin was mistaken about one thing. The old dragon's injuries weren't solely due to a single needle. The main reason was that the old dragon was in the middle of casting a spell and was forcefully interrupted, causing the spell to backfire and injure him to this extent. However, if Lin Jin wasn't aware of this, the others were even more clueless. Naturally, they all gave the credit to the Curator for defeating the old dragon. Seeing the masked Curator approach, the old dragon tried to lift its head several times but failed. Having lived for more than 400 years, the old dragon was incredibly intelligent, so it knew what awaited it. Cough, cough. Coughing out a mouthful of blood, the old dragon said, "The winner takes all. I admit defeat. Spiritual Master, your cultivation is profound and I admit my inferiority. Spiritual Master, you are broad-minded and should know that it's not easy for monsters like us to cultivate. Please, Spiritual Master, have mercy and spare my life. I'm willing to retract the curse and also tell you a great secret." Was the old dragon afraid and begging for mercy now? It was too late. Putting aside what a true expert would do, Lin Jin no longer trusted the old dragon. Moreover, Lin Jin knew that the old dragon didn't have long to live. Even if he didn't kill it, it wouldn't last much longer. The curse was the key to prolonging its life, so how could it retract it so easily? The old dragon was most likely stalling for time again. As for the so-called great secret, Lin Jin wasn't interested in it either. It might just be a lie made up by the old dragon. Hence, Lin Jin remained silent. Sensing that the situation wasn't looking good, the old dragon quickly said, "Spiritual Master, are you really going to kill me? If you kill me, the curse on the 6th princess will never be broken. She won't be able to escape death. Lin Jin shook his head. Even at a time like this, the old dragon was still spouting nonsense. Had it been someone else, they might have been skeptical, but Lin Jin refused to believe him at all. Because Lin Jin had already obtained the answer to breaking the curse from the museum. All he had to do was kill the old dragon. There was no need for him to do anything else. Seeing that the curator hadn't said a word, the old dragon panicked. Living for more than 400 years was a long time, but the longer it was, the more afraid he was of death. Perhaps knowing that his death was near, the old dragon was trembling all over. At that moment, Lin Jin secretly invoked a spell under his sleeve. The next instant, Xiaohua pounced over, enlarged himself, and bit down on the old dragon's neck. His razor-sharp teeth pierced through the old dragon's neck, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The old dragon twisted and struggled but gradually lost his strength. "Drink as much as you can. This is dragon blood, a great tonic. It's 100 times better than the dragon blood pill," Lin Jin told Xiaohua. Chapter 259. Lin Jin obviously wouldn't let go of such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Xiaohua was just an average beast to begin with, not even a rare beast. Lin Jin had used pills and acupuncture to help Xiaohua refine the yang flames in his body. After 2 perfect evolutions, Xiaohua's body was cleansed and transformed. Even so, Xiaohua was now at rank 4, his limit. If he wanted to break through again, he would have to undergo a metamorphosis. It was for this reason that Lin Jin had prepared a dragon blood pill for Xiaohua. However, he hadn't had the time to regulate his veins and change his blood. Now was an opportunity. While Xiaohua was sucking the old dragon's blood, Lin Jin stepped forward and took out the lesser dragon blood pill. Using a small knife, he cut open Xiaohua's back and stuffed the pill into his flesh. Then, he sewed it up with a coiled wire needle. After that, he pricked Xiaohua's acupoints with hundreds of silver needles to strengthen his veins and change his blood. Everyone around them was surprised to see this. Be it the Black Crow scholar or the coffin bearer, they had never seen such a technique before. Who would dare to prick an acupoint to release all the blood in their body? No matter how powerful a beast was, once all its blood was drained, it would surely die. But Xiaohua was bleeding all over. As the blood flew out, it immediately turned into flames. With the coiled wire needle stabilizing Xiaohua's internal organs, he wouldn't die even if he lost blood. After that, it was time to cleanse his blood. Half of the old dragon's neck had been bitten off by Xiaohua, and all his blood had been sucked dry. But even so, the old dragon didn't seem to be breathing his last breath. After all, he was an old monster that had lived for more than 400 years. His tenacious vitality was nothing short of amazing. But anyone could tell that the old dragon was only hanging on to his last breath. He wasn't completely dead yet. But it was only a matter of time. This is the blood marrow cleansing technique. Great esteemed master, I, Yu Hong, know my wrongs. Since it's not easy to cultivate, please save my life. The old dragon seemed to have seen something incredible, as his tone was filled with fear and disbelief. However, before he could finish his sentence, he let out a breath of air. The next instant, the old dragon's head tilted to the side and he died. Almost at the same time the old dragon died, Emperor He Qian seemed to have sensed something. His pupils dilated, and he quickly used the power of their blood contract to stabilize his rank 4 jade dragon. He Qian vaguely heard an angry roar. He Qian, how dare you betray me? His roar was filled with unwillingness and resentment. Just hearing it made one shiver and break out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, the voice soon disappeared without a trace, as if it had never been there. Among the ministers, those with rank 3 jade dragon pet beasts also sensed their pet beasts growing restless and tried their best to calm them down. Some of them, whose blood contract realm was too low, actually lost control of their pet beasts and lost control of them. For a time, the mansions of many ministers were in a mess, and it was a mess. In some places, lives were lost. A few palace maids were taking care of the sixth princess, Hiyu, day and night. There were also imperial physicians standing guard outside. During this period of time, they were very careful, afraid that something might happen. But at this moment, the sixth princess, who had been lying quietly on the bed, suddenly had a pained expression on her face. Her body suddenly arched up, and there was a ball of cold air in her lower abdomen. At this moment, it was howling in rage. But moments later, the cold air disappeared without a trace. The palace maids in the room were scared out of their wits. Earlier, a strong gust of wind blew in the room and black air swirled around. They could vaguely make out the silhouette of a dragon swimming around. The braver ones managed to withstand it, but the more timid ones simply screamed and fainted. Emperor He was the first to report the situation. He rushed over as well. "Your Majesty, just now." A palace maid knelt down to report. He waved his hand. "That's enough. Don't speak of this outside. Remember, anyone who says anything will be executed." "Yes, yes." "You're dismissed." At He order, everyone retreated from the room. He turned to Hiyu. Although she was still unconscious, for some reason, her complexion looked much better. This time, He didn't even call for the imperial physician. After a closer look, he clenched his fists in agitation. "It's gone. It's really gone." Even now, He couldn't confirm his guess. He immediately called for head eunuch Yao Xing and had him send someone to gather information. Soon, he received a report. Jade Dragon Temple is still surrounded by a barrier. No one is entering or exiting, Yao Xing reported honestly. He nodded. Then, remembering something, he ordered, "Go, have someone release Qing'er." "Seventh princess?" Yao Xing hesitated. "Your Majesty, seventh princess has been causing a ruckus for the past few days. I'm afraid it's fine. Qing'er has a straightforward and innocent personality. When her pet beast evolved unexpectedly, I knew there must be an expert helping her. Besides, she has mentioned the name curator more than once. I think the expert she met must be the curator as well. Now that the situation has been settled, letting Qing'er out will be beneficial to us. What should I do if that protective curator comes looking for her?" Yao Xing hurried off to carry out He orders. Along the way, Yao Xing was deep in thought. From start to end, everything was within His Majesty's expectations. One could say that His Majesty was the true winner this time. As expected of a king, all Yao Xing needed to do now was follow his orders. He wouldn't ask questions that shouldn't be asked. After regaining her freedom, He hurried over to Hiyu's side. Even when she saw He she bowed with a straight face before running to her sister's bedside to check on her. "Qing'er, don't worry. Your sister is fine now." He was all smiles. As the emperor, He rarely smiled. At least, He couldn't remember her father ever smiling before. She had always had a stern and dignified expression on her face, but at this moment, her father, the emperor, was actually smiling. Moreover, he was smiling very happily, as if something great had happened. He couldn't figure out the specifics. She was also a little afraid of her father, so she didn't dare to ask. But she believed that Hiyu was fine, because the curator had promised her that with his abilities, he could definitely do it. He had never doubted him since the beginning. Inside the temple, Lin Jin still hadn't deactivated the nebula barrier. Lin Jin didn't have any plans to cleanse Xiaohua's bone marrow, but since he was here, he might as well do it. The others didn't have any objections. Being able to witness such a great skill like bone marrow cleansing with their own eyes was more than what they could ask for. They held their breaths as they watched excitedly. "I've heard of bone marrow cleansing before. Legend has it that during the golden age of immortals, this was done for cultivators. Now that beasts are in power, changing a beast's constitution is an incredible skill. I didn't expect the curator to know how to do it too. Amazing. Evil Scholar had read quite a lot. Although he wasn't the most skilled, he was still quite knowledgeable. Now that he said it, everyone understood. Shoo, keep it down. Don't disturb the curator, Black Crow suddenly said. At this time, there were no longer any flames on Xiaohua's body. The red fur on his body had also changed a little. Some of it glowed with a blue light. Ghost Child looked hesitant. After some thought, she said, "This Jade Dragon and the Fire Wolf's attributes aren't compatible. Logically speaking, even if blood is to be exchanged, the 5 elements must be compatible. Otherwise," she didn't finish her sentence, but everyone understood what she meant. The Jade Dragon's attributes were wind and water. Wind and water could form ice. Needless to say, the Fire Wolf was a fire elemental. Even if it had other attributes, it would at most be wood or metal. Since water and fire were incompatible, they couldn't be fused. A single misstep could cause the pet beast to die. Chapter 260. The conflicting attributes of ice and fire were no joke. No matter what the situation was, ice and fire would not exist at the same time. It was fine if they were separated by a distance, but it was impossible for these 2 attributes to be used together. Everyone here was a villainous expert with considerable knowledge. Yet, they had never seen anyone forcefully fusing 2 different attributes into a single pet beast. In fact, there were pet beasts with conflicting attributes, but they were innate. Innate constitutions were bestowed upon them by the heavenly axiom, so it was possible. However, these types of pet beasts were basically useless. No one would form a blood pact with them, nor would anyone spend time and effort to nurture them. In fact, creatures with conflicting attributes, be it humans or beasts, were plagued with disasters and had a short lifespan. If someone had told them that they could rely on human strength to fuse 2 conflicting attributes into a pet beast, none of them would have believed it. Even if someone did, they would think it was a fantasy story. But now, they were witnessing it with their own eyes. If this can be done, wouldn't the curator's abilities be on par with the heavenly axiom? Black Crow mumbled to himself. Although his words were exaggerated, it was clear what he was thinking at the moment. Meanwhile, Lin Jin already knew the old dragon's attribute. During their last encounter, he had gotten a thorough understanding of the old dragon through the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Lin Jin knew that the old dragon's attribute was completely incompatible with Xiaohua's. They were practically conflicting. Logically speaking, even if he wanted to change blood and cleanse his marrow, he should have chosen a compatible attribute or at least one that didn't clash. But even so, Lin Jin still messed it up. This was because there was a solution in the museum that could solve the problem they were currently facing. In other words, he had a ready-made manual so he could just follow it. There was no need to think too much about it, because up until now, nothing in the museum had ever gone wrong. Moreover, Lin Jin's current level had reached new height. He wasn't just relying on the Museum of Deadly Beasts. When he used it, he could also improve his knowledge. He thought that method was reasonable, so he used it without hesitation. As for how to fuse ice and fire, this was essentially impossible. However, everything in the world could be split into 2, and yin and yang could be combined. The method in the Museum of Deadly Beasts was to use the coiled wire needle and dragon blood to refine Xiaohua's internal organs, divide yin and yang, and fuse them into the Tai Chi diagram. This way, yin and yang could be combined. It was very simple to explain, but those who didn't understand and didn't know how to do it would definitely think that it was a fairy tale. In order to achieve this, the pulse-seeking technique was indispensable, and he also needed a pure fire-type dragon blood pill. Coincidentally, Lin Jin had both. The lesser dragon blood pill he received as a reward in the cultivator tournament happened to be of the fire attribute. With this, it would be possible for him to give Xiaohua a yin-yang fusion. Xiaohua, This is a great opportunity for you. When the ice and fire fuse into a yin-yang tai chi, it'll definitely be painful. Just bear with it, Lin Jin whispered as he walked over and stroked Xiaohua's head. Xiaohua whimpered a few times. All right. Lin Jin activated his acupuncture technique, and hundreds of silver needles pierced into Xiaohua's body at the same time. They pierced his acupoints, channeled his spirit, and divided his yin and yang. The entire process took less than an hour, but Xiaohua was already in excruciating pain. However, it gritted its sharp teeth and endured it without making a sound. Yin and yang fusion, Lin Jin said. He lifted a finger and pointed. The next instant, Xiaohua's body exploded into pieces. This startled Black Crow, Ghost Child, and the others so much that they took a step back in fright. It failed. It's over, it's over. Sure enough, these conflicting attributes are difficult to fuse. Even the curator can fail. Each of them had their own thoughts, but they were all worried. However, they soon discovered to their horror that the body of the fire-wolf beast had been split into two. One was burning like a raging flame, while the other was floating like ice. At this moment, the coffin man seemed to have thought of something, and his whole body trembled. Ghost Child, this is a Dharma body. Coffin Man's voice was trembling, but it was clear that he was extremely agitated. It was hard to imagine that with Coffin Man's personality, he could speak in such a tone. It was obvious how shocked he was. At the mention of Dharma body, Ghost Child shuddered as well. She took a closer look and nodded. The spirit enters the body, the skill is infused into the heart, and the spirit embryo is nurtured. This is the Dharma body. Who would have thought that we, the southern mountain deities, would have the chance to witness the Dharma body technique that we, the 5 deities of Nanling, have been trying so hard to obtain all those years ago. At this moment, forget Ghost Child and Coffin Man, even their pet beasts were excited. Madame Ghost Child's swaddling clothes let out a strange baby cry in excitement. Inside Coffin Man's coffin, the zombie Cthulhu was restless as well, knocking against the coffin. Black Crow and Evil Scholar, on the other hand, did not know the wonders of Dharmakaya and were a little confused. However, they were very close to Ghost Child and Coffin Man and had heard the names of their opponent. They understood that Dharmakaya was no small matter. Curious, they asked in hushed tones while Ghost Child and Coffin Man explained to them. Now that they understood the wonders of the Dharma body, both Black Crow and Evil Scholar wore expressions of yearning. When ancient cultivators embarked on the path of immortality, the Dharma body was a stage they had to go through. Moreover, the Dharma body is a manifestation of the law and can manipulate the power of the 5 elements. Isn't this no different from immortals? Evil Scholar suddenly muttered. Coffin Man was usually quiet, but when it came to his favorite topic, he would talk endlessly. Without waiting for Ghost Child to speak, he explained, first of all, a Dharma body isn't an immortal, but all immortals have Dharma bodies. Also, now that the immortal path has fallen, I'm afraid there are no longer any true immortals left in this world. On the other hand, beast cultivators are on the rise. According to ancient records, beast cultivation used to be a minor path back in the day, but now, it has become mainstream. Beasts can also cultivate Dharma bodies so naturally, it's more difficult. Back then, we, the 5 deities of Nanling, searched for years for a pet beast Dharma body, but to no avail. Because of this, when we saw the curator condensing a Dharma body for that firewolf, we were inspired. Perhaps the curator is a true immortal of this era. It was obvious how much Coffin Man worshipped the curator. Forget him, everyone else here was filled with admiration. Even their pet beasts were staring at the firewolf enviously. To have a true immortal condensing a Dharma body for it was such a great opportunity and luck. Why couldn't such a good thing happen to them? However, just because they couldn't do it now didn't mean they couldn't in the future. If they were lucky, the curator might even help them condense a Dharma body in the future. This kind of thing, just thinking about it made people excited. Meanwhile, Lin Jin had already sheathed his needles. Given the current situation, the pulse-seeking technique was no longer necessary. Chapter 261. According to the museum's description of the fire wolf's blood and marrow cleansing, yin and yang could be refined. After that, there would be different branches. The top branch was to condense a dharma body, the middle branch was to condense a yin and yang dharma body, and the bottom branch was to condense an ice and fire spirit. These three options obviously had different levels of difficulty. Lin Jin had already read through them. The best dharma body among these three branches was so difficult that it was practically impossible to achieve. Hence, he gave up on it. As for the worst one, he wouldn't choose it unless he had no other choice. And so, only the middle option remained. The yin and yang dharma body. This was the path of mediocrity. As long as there was a balance of yin and yang, one could condense a dharma body. Although it was average, it depended on the time. During the ancient era of immortals, it was only SOSO, but it could still be considered mediocre. But now it was absolutely amazing. In this world, be it humans or monsters, who could still condense a dharma body. Hence, Black Crow and the others had truly learned something new today. It wasn't easy for Lin Jin to help Xiaohua condense this mediocre yin-yang dharma body. Fortunately, with the rank 5 Jade Dragon's blood and Xiaohua's two perfect evolutions, he now had a solid foundation. With Lin Jin's previous blood transfusion and marrow cleansing, it was now possible for him to condense a dharma body. Dharma body fusion, yin-yang rotation. Lin Jin invoked a spell, using his own spirit energy as a guide. The next instant, extreme cold and pure yang merged into one. They first collided before gradually calming down, forming a yin-yang taiji symbol. Then, a cocoon of ice and flame grew on the taiji symbol. The cocoon was made of ice threads, but it could be coated in flames. It was a rare occurrence, and it was only slightly bigger than a fist. Even after the cocoon grew larger, it was only about 2 feet tall. Lin Jin couldn't hold on any longer. He was wearing a demon mask. Otherwise, the others would definitely be able to see that his face was pale and bloodless right now. According to his original intention, he should have made this frigid flame cocoon as tall as a person, or even bigger. Only then would the Dharmakaya that hatched be considered perfect and awesome. It could even directly push Xiaohua to the 5th level. But the problem was that he was essentially still a mortal, not an ancient cultivator. Thus, even though his heart was willing, his strength was insufficient. This was also because he had risked his life. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to support this much. Just as she was about to faint, Lin Jin retracted his hand just in time, forcing himself not to collapse to the ground. Immediately, he used the pulse-seeking technique to ease the pain, but even then, the effect was minimal. At this time, the frigid flame cocoon broke. A small little flame crawled out. However, there was a soft glow around Xiaohua's body. That was because Xiaohua no longer had a physical body. Right now, he was in his avatar state. In this state, Xiaohua could freely control ice and fire. Compared to before, he was many times stronger. Although he did not directly advance to the 5th rank, his strength was enough to contend with a true 5th rank. More importantly, Lin Jin had cleansed Xiaohua's body, which was equivalent to reconstructing his body. Xiaohua was no longer a firewolf. Not even rare beasts could compare to him. Given time, his future achievements would be unimaginable. Lin Jin was barely holding on. He didn't expect Xiaohua's dharma body to be so draining. He didn't say much as he didn't have the strength to. He reached out to retrieve the nebula flag before communicating with the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Taking a step back, he vanished without a trace. Right now, Lin Jin had no choice but to head to the Museum of Deadly Beasts for a while. Otherwise, it wouldn't look good if he fainted outside. More importantly, he was here as the curator. If he really fainted, wouldn't his invincible image crumble? Hence, even if he were to faint, he had to hide in the visitation hall first. The visitation hall could be opened to Lin Jin at any time. This was the convenience of being the curator, which made him different from the other visitors. When Black Crow, Ghost Child, and the others saw the curator vanish and the barrier around them disappearing, they knew that the curator had left without saying goodbye. But none of them dared to complain. Back in the visitation hall, the curator had always been amiable. Now that they saw the curator in action, it was truly terrifying. Against the old dragon, the curator defeated him with his aura alone. Then, he used his supernatural powers to manifest a Dharma body for his disciple's pet beast. It was amazing. Today has really been an eye-opener. Evil Scholar was so excited that his fingers were trembling. Not bad. This trip to Jade Dragon Kingdom wasn't in vain, Black Crow said excitedly. He looked at the firewolf. This firewolf was as small as a kitten and its aura seemed average. But Black Crow knew better than to judge from its appearance. This firewolf was already at the Dharma body level. Even if he and the Black Falcon were to go all out, they probably wouldn't last more than 10 moves. Everyone! Ghost Child called out. Only then did the others snap out of their daze. The temple was now surrounded by soldiers in full armor, wielding spears and crossbows. All of them were brimming with murderous intent. In front of them were hundreds of armored rhinoceroses. These beasts had incredibly thick hide armor and were huge in stature. They were like moving walls. If they charged together, no one could stop them. These people were obviously from the Jade Dragon Kingdom, and they had surrounded the area. However, Black Crow and Ghost Child weren't ordinary people, so they didn't care. Although there were many soldiers, they weren't worth mentioning in their eyes. As for the beasts, they were the same. A general rode forward but didn't carry a weapon. Instead, he shouted, "His Majesty, the Emperor of Jade Dragon Kingdom, invites Mr. Curator into the palace." They were here to invite the curator. But the curator had already left. Seeing the people around them, Black Crow smirked. These people are lying to themselves. Who are they trying to scare by bringing so many people here? Even if they invited me, Black Crow, and your emperor came personally, I might not even do them the honor. How can you be so stingy when inviting the curator? Who would go? Beside him, Evil Scholar chuckled as he waved his folding fan. Madame Ghost Child patted her swaddle as she stared at the general. However, the general didn't dare to look her in the eye. It couldn't be helped. Madame Ghost Child's gaze was too sinister. No matter how strong one was, they wouldn't dare to look her in the eye for too long. Instead, Coffin Man said, "The curator's disciple is from Jade Dragon Kingdom. It's best if we don't get into a conflict with them." Coffin Man was the calmest person in this crucial moment. "I almost forgot." Evil Scholar snapped out of his daze and quickly retracted his murderous aura. Right now, he didn't look as crazy as before. Madame Ghost Child stepped forward and said, "General, please go back and inform Jade Dragon Emperor that the curator has left to attend to some matters. I'm afraid he won't be able to visit." Chapter 262. This. The leading general was clearly hesitant. Just then, a wolf's howl was heard. The next instant the weather changed. Strong winds blew and dark clouds gathered. The entire royal capital's temperature seemed to have dropped a little. The sudden change in weather was clearly not natural. In the past, only the Jade Dragon beast in the Jade Dragon Temple could do something like this. The leading general was also Emperor He Qian's trusted aide. As a trusted aide, he was privy to many things. For example, he knew that today might be the day the fate of Jade Dragon Kingdom would be decided. He also knew that the old dragon in the temple might be dead. But if that was the case, why would the weather change? Could it be that the old dragon wasn't dead yet? At the thought of this, fear welled up in his heart. If the old dragon wasn't dead, then things would be troublesome. The emperor had obviously betrayed the jade dragon deity. If the old dragon didn't die in the hands of the curator, the consequences would be unimaginable. In fact, it wasn't just this general. Everyone in the royal capital was panicking at the sudden change in weather. The one who was the most shaken was obviously Emperor He Qian. He was currently sitting in the palace, looking up at the stormy sky with a grave expression. Yuer's curse has been broken. Logically speaking, the jade dragon deity should be dead. So why would the weather change? He Qian mumbled to himself. He knew that this ability to stir up the weather was the jade dragon deity's unique skill. In the past, whenever He Qian angered the other party, the jade dragon deity would do the same. He Qian had had enough of this. The entire He family had been under the jade dragon deity's control for so many years. He Qian had had enough of it. Hence, he decided to use the curator to destroy the jade dragon deity. Of course, doing this was a risk. It was a gamble. If the curator failed, the jade dragon deity would surely hold He Qian accountable for his betrayal. He Qian had given this matter careful thought. However, based on the curator's abilities and tricks, He Qian felt that the risk was worth taking. If everything went according to plan, the one who helped He Qian's rank 2 tetrawinged butterfly dragon evolve to rank 3 was the curator. He Qian had investigated this before. Also, he knew about Lin Jin's growth. Lin Jin's sudden rise to power was nothing out of the ordinary. This wasn't normal at any point in time. However, if Lin Jin had an important figure like the curator backing him up, his rise to power was nothing out of the ordinary. Other than that, the incident with Snake Country showed He Qian the curator's terrifying ability to mobilize people. Be it Black Crow or Madame Ghostchild, neither of them could be ordered around by an intermediate country. In fact, even a major country couldn't order these villainous experts around. But the curator could do it. This was fundamentally different from Minister Yu's method of spending some money to hire experts of the evil path. Spending money to hire experts of the evil path to kill a few people was fine, but asking them to fight a war with another intermediate kingdom was something that no evil path expert would listen to. From this point alone, one could tell that the curator was no small fry. Especially the last time, the jade dragon deity seemed to have suffered a little at the hands of the curator, which prompted He Qian to make up his mind to take control of the situation in the royal city at a critical moment. On the imperial court side, not only did Minister Yu side with the jade dragon deity, but many of the officials also obeyed the jade dragon deity's orders. This time, He Qian used Minister Yu's death to gain control of this group of people. He Qian could control these conflicts, but he couldn't do anything about the jade dragon deity. There was no doubt that the sixth princess, He Yu, had broken the curse in her body. Moreover, He Qian's pet beast, a rank 4 jade dragon, was also visibly agitated. This meant that the jade dragon deity had been slain. So what was going on with this sudden change in weather? He Qian finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He immediately called for his men. He wanted to head over to the temple to investigate. Meanwhile, over at the temple, the one stirring up the storm wasn't the jade dragon deity, but Xiaohua, who had obtained the yin-yang dharma body. Xiaohua's roar earlier was just a casual action. He didn't expect it to stir up a storm. Even Xiaohua was shocked. Having just obtained the jade dragon deity's power, Xiaohua was clearly not used to it yet. Not to mention it, even Heya and the others were dumbfounded. This yin-yang celestial body was indeed extraordinary. A simple roar could actually stir up the wind and clouds. This was too much. Just then, the general came to his senses and quickly said, "It's a pity that curator isn't here. Everyone, if you have time, feel free to visit the palace." Just as Black Crow was about to decline, Evil Scholar held him back and said, "General, please wait for a moment." Seeing a door open, the general was overjoyed and quickly retreated. Now, he could see clearly that this group of people could not be stopped by force at all, so he immediately changed his strategy. Moreover, when he came, His Majesty the Emperor had also told him not to threaten them, but to be amiable. Even if they wanted to leave, he could not force them to stay. The surrounding soldiers retreated as well, leaving only a few behind to guard the area. Black Crow and the others were confused. Evil Scholar said, "Curator didn't say he wouldn't be back. Maybe something came up at the last minute. It's not good for us to just leave. Why don't we wait here in the royal capital? Curator will return sooner or later." At this, the others agreed that this was the best option. Also, they couldn't leave. After all, the Fire Wolf and White Ape were here while Curator and Lin Jin weren't. They had to look after them. At this time, Emperor He Qian also hurried over. First, he glanced at the temple. Seeing that there was no longer any dragon energy left, he knew the Jade Dragon deity was dead. This made the stone in his heart fall to the ground. After years of humiliation, the royal He family could finally make a comeback. They would no longer be oppressed by the Jade Dragon deity, and would no longer need to use the women of the family to prolong his life. "Your Majesty, just now." The general reported the situation in detail. He Qian was stunned. He heard that it was a fire wolf that had stirred up the wind and clouds earlier. Since when did a fire wolf have such supernatural powers? He Qian stepped forward and the general immediately shouted, "Jade Dragon Kingdom, His Majesty the Emperor has arrived." The Jade Dragon Emperor had arrived. Black Crow and the others looked over. As villainous experts, they didn't care about the so-called royal authority. Since they all had rank 4 pet beasts, they had nothing to fear. However, they still had to be courteous, especially when the other party had taken the initiative to greet them. "I, He Qian, have long heard of your names." He Qian didn't seem any less intimidating, but he was now more approachable. He didn't lose the dignity of a royal family, but he still gave others the impression that he was an equal. Speaking of which, it wasn't easy for him to achieve this. He greeted them with a smile and was courteous. Even villainous experts couldn't keep a straight face at a time like this. Moreover, Black Crow and the others weren't sure what Curator's attitude toward this Jade Dragon Emperor was, so it was better to be polite. More importantly, even if they didn't want to give this emperor face, they had to show He Qing some respect. Chapter 263. Greetings, Your Majesty. Greetings, Emperor Jade Dragon. The few of them bowed in unison. Of course, they weren't citizens of the Jade Dragon Kingdom, so there was no need for formal greetings. He Qian has long heard of the curator's great name and came to meet you today. However, I heard that he had to leave due to some matters, so I'm sorry. However, all of you are equally famous. If you have the time, feel free to visit the palace. I will treat you all as my honored guests, He Qian said with a smile. Black Crow and the others exchanged glances. Knowing them, they didn't want to have too much to do with royalty. Their visit this time had nothing to do with the Jade Dragon Kingdom either. It was entirely due to the curator's summons. Without him, they wouldn't have gotten themselves involved in this mess. Although they planned to stay here for the next few days, they had no intention of visiting the palace. Madame Ghostchild said, "Your Majesty, I have a question. I hope you can answer me honestly." "Go ahead." He Qian glanced at the beautiful woman, musing, "So this is Madame Ghostchild, one of the top experts on the villainous path. Rumor has it that no one in South Continent dared to provoke her. Even intermediate countries avoided her as much as possible. If he could recruit an expert of this level for his own use, it would definitely be beneficial to the Jade Dragon Kingdom. Now that the Jade Dragon deity was killed and Minister Yu was dead, they had lost 2 experts. Especially the Jade Dragon deity, who used to be a rank 5 dragon and once pushed the Jade Dragon Kingdom to the ranks of premium countries. Unfortunately, that was just a temporary glory. Later on, the jade dragon deity was severely injured by a certain country's guardian beast. As if scared out of his wits, he holed up, causing the jade dragon kingdom's strength to decline. Later on, he had to use the lives of royal ladies to prolong his life. Now that the jade dragon curse had been broken, although they were free from the evil dragon's control, the jade dragon kingdom's strength was greatly reduced and they urgently needed experts to replenish their ranks. These people were no ordinary people. If they could serve the jade dragon kingdom, perhaps the jade dragon kingdom could still become a premium country in the future. As he pondered, Madame Ghostchild asked, "Your Majesty, has the curse been removed from 6th Princess Hiyu's body?" This was what Madame Ghostchild wanted to know. She knew that this was the curator's motive. He had done so much just to help He Qing lift the curse on her sister, Hiyu. Now that the old dragon was dead, it was still unknown whether the curse had been lifted or not. When He Qian heard this, he was certain that the curator had taken action because of his 6th daughter. "Thank you for your concern. The curse in my 6th daughter's body has been removed. She's fine now," He Qian said. Madame Ghostchild nodded. It was enough to confirm this matter. There was no need to ask anything else. Naturally, none of them would really go to the palace as guests. After exchanging a few pleasantries, He Qian did not insist. On the way back to the palace, He Qian instructed, "For the next few days, do not send anyone to disturb them. If they want to stay in Royal City, let them stay." "Your Majesty, these people are villainous experts after all. Almost every one of them has a rank 4 pet beast. If they have ulterior motives, I'm afraid," the subordinate whispered. He Qian shook his head. "So what if you're on guard?" Without another word, he spurred his horse back to the palace. He Qian had kept the incident at Jade Dragon Temple under tight control. Only a few people in the royal city knew the truth. Over the next 2 days, the entire Jade Dragon dynasty was shaken. Many officials were sacked and imprisoned. Some were even beheaded, losing their lives. There were also people who were promoted. It was a drastic change. Once the Jade Dragon deity died, his faction was almost wiped out by He Qian. In terms of methods, He Qian was undoubtedly very forceful. This was the only way he could stabilize the situation in Jade Dragon Kingdom. However, outside of officialdom, things were peaceful. In the royal city, Black Crow and the others had been waiting for the curator to return for several days. On the 3rd day, Lin Jin finally pushed open the door and entered. The group immediately got up. Most of them had never seen Lin Jin before. But when they saw the fire wolf pouncing at him and White Ape respectfully addressing him as master, they knew this young man was the curator's disciple, Lin Jin. "Appraiser Lin." The group got up and saluted. Even if he was only the curator's disciple, he was still a disciple who represented the curator. Hence, they were polite to him. He had been recuperating for the past few days. After being injured by the old dragon, the curator showed up. "Where's the curator?" Evil Scholar asked. Lin Jin smiled. "The curator has something to attend to, so he sent me here to thank you all. Thank you for your help." Having said that, he saluted. The group quickly waved to return the gesture. Of course. We owe the curator a great debt of gratitude. Forget something as trivial as this. Even if we had to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of flames, we wouldn't even frown, Black Crow vowed. Lin Jin smiled, not suspecting anything. These people were indeed loyal. Although they were all trying to curry favor with the curator and receive his guidance, it was still not easy for them to do so. Right, that old Taoist has been waiting for 2 days too. But he's not staying at an inn. He's staying in an abandoned yard in the city, Evil Scholar said. Lin Jin nodded, acknowledging. The old Taoist was definitely going to meet him, but Lin Jin had no intention of using the curator's identity. Helping Xiaohua condense the yin-yang dharma body had taken a toll on Lin Jin. Even after recuperating in the visitation hall for 2 days, he only managed to recover a little. If he used the curator's identity, it would be bad if he was discovered. Moreover, Lin Jin had made up his mind. After all, the curator's identity wasn't real. Hence, he would only appear in the visitation hall from now on. If he could avoid using the curator's identity outside, he would do so. Lin Jin noticed that Evil Scholar and Coffin Man seemed disappointed. He knew that they must have something to ask of the curator. After some thought, Lin Jin saluted them. Before he left, the curator left some words for me. I wonder if you two would like to hear them? Evil Scholar and Coffin Man were indeed disappointed. They came here to meet the curator and also to receive his guidance. Now that the curator had left without saying goodbye, they would be lying if they said they weren't disappointed. Upon hearing Lin Jin's words, their faces lit up. I want to hear it, I want to hear it, Evil Scholar said anxiously. Coffin Man stepped forward as well. Appraiser Lin, please tell us what the curator left for us. Lin Jin smiled. The curator said that he has been observing your pet beasts and told me some ways to improve them. If you two want to hear it, I will tell you the truth. Lin Jin was spouting nonsense. He was the curator, so this so-called improvement method was something he came up with. However, Evil Scholar and Coffin Man believed him without a doubt. They rubbed their palms together in excitement. Beside him, Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild were delighted as well. They weren't in a hurry because as visitors of the visitation hall, they would be able to meet the curator next time. However, Evil Scholar and Coffin Man weren't as lucky. Although the curator wasn't going to personally appraise their beasts this time, Appraiser Lin, as the curator's disciple and having received instructions from the curator himself, shouldn't be too bad. Chapter 264. Little did they know that Lin Jin and curator were actually the same person. Lin Jin turned to Evil Scholar. Lin Jin could still remember Evil Scholar's pet beast clearly. It looked like a white cat, but it was actually a rank 3 spirit devourer with all 5 elements. Moreover, it was showing signs of evolution. Speaking of which, this pet beast was rather unique. Before it reached rank 4, it was nothing special. Even when compared to other rank 3 pet beasts, it had no advantage. But once it evolved into rank 4, everything changed. Once its Spirit Devourer bloodline was activated, most pet beasts of the same rank wouldn't stand a chance against it. Evil Scholar had no idea how he got his hands on this Spirit Devourer beast. It seemed like he didn't know how powerful this Spirit Devourer beast was. Otherwise, he would have used special methods to raise it and it wouldn't have failed to evolve by now. But to Lin Jin, none of this mattered. With Lin Jin's current abilities and skills, he probably didn't need any external help to evolve a rank 3 pet beast that was showing signs of evolution. The pulse-seeking technique alone could help it evolve. Scholar, let me take a look at your pet beast. Lin Jin extended his hand. Seeing this, Scholar quickly reminded him, afraid that his white cat would scratch Lin Jin. But just as he was about to speak, Black Crow chuckled. Scholar, relax. Don't forget that Appraiser Lin is curator's disciple. At first, the scholar didn't understand what Lin Jin meant. But when he saw how easily Lin Jin held his white cat in his arms, the scholar immediately understood what he meant. Black Crow seemed to have told him that curator could subdue beasts. Back when they first went to the visitation hall, Black Crow had ordered his black falcon to attack, but the creature had knelt down halfway. When he told Lin Jin this, Black Crow had a complicated expression on his face. At first, the scholar thought Black Crow was exaggerating. But after witnessing the curator, witnessing how easily Lin Jin carried the white cat in his arms, the scholar believed him. Sure enough, a great teacher produces a great disciple. Evil Scholar mumbled. Everything else aside, just this ability to subdue and subdue other people's pet beasts was enough for him to dominate the world. The white cat was currently nestled obediently in Lin Jin's arms, rubbing its head against him non-stop. Evil Scholar was dumbfounded as he silently cursed the stupid cat. The cat had never been this obedient and adorable when it was with him. How could it change its temperament in Appraiser Lin's arms? Little did he know that Lin Jean already had the ability to intimidate beasts. After staying in the museum for several days, Lin Jean had absorbed quite a bit of the museum's aura. This aura was a great supplement to beasts, which was why the white cat was so docile and obedient. Hugging the white cat, Lin Jean pondered for a moment before taking out a pill. At this, the white cat stuck its tongue out and licked the pill. Lin Jean laughed heartily at this. You sure know what's good for you. Although Lin Jean should be able to help the white cat evolve without the help of pills, he was more confident with the help of pills. This pill was called a spirit-gathering pill. It wasn't just any ordinary spirit-gathering pill. Lin Jean had refined it using the museum's prescription, and its effects were at least 10 times stronger than those available on the market. Lin Jean had prepared this pill for Xiaohua and the white ape. Now that Xiaohua had absorbed the jade dragon's blood, his potential was much stronger than before. However, as Lin Jean had reached his limit, Xiaohua's Dharma body needed to be nourished slowly. That was why he had refined some spirit-gathering pills in the museum. Now, he was giving one to the white cat to help it evolve. The pill's effects were too strong, so the cat could only lick it bit by bit. This would take some time, so Lin Jean stroked the cat's head as he approached Coffin Man. Coffin Man smiled at Lin Jean's approach. However, his smile didn't look much better than crying. The coffin was placed beside him. Ever since Madame Ghostchild severed Coffin Man's symbiosis under Lin Jin's guidance, Coffin Man no longer had to carry a coffin on his back all the time. This was something unimaginable in the past few decades. Based on this alone, Coffin Man considered Curator a great benefactor. Needless to say, Curator had basically saved his life. Although the person before him wasn't Curator, Curator's disciple still represented Curator. Appraiser Lin. Coffin Man called out. Lin Jean waved his hand. It's fine. I'll help you take a look at Zombie Cthulhu. Having said that, Lin Jean saw Coffin Man's stunned expression and knew he had let the cat out of the bag. This was Lin Jin's first time meeting Coffin Man, so he shouldn't have known his pet beast's name. However, this was an easy matter. Lin Jean could just pretend that Curator had told him about it, and he didn't even have to explain. Sure enough, Coffin Man figured out what was going on after some thought. However, the next second, Coffin Man tensed up again, because he saw Lin Jean trying to open the coffin with one hand. Coffin Man immediately stopped him. Appraiser Lin. Lin Jean turned to him in confusion. Yes. Well. Coffin Man pondered for a moment before saying, My pet beast has an odd temper and tends to hurt people. Even as its blood contract owner, I'm often hurt by it. I'm worried that Appraiser Lin might get hurt because you don't know about it. At this, Lin Jean nodded with a smile. Thank you. Curator has already told me about Zombie Cthulhu's characteristic. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Since Lin Jean had put it that way, Coffin Man couldn't say anything else. However, he was worried that something might go wrong. After all, although Appraiser Lin was Curator's disciple, he was still too young. On the other hand, Madame Ghostchild shot Coffin Man a reassuring look. Old Coffin, this Appraiser Lin is very confident. He even knows your pet beast's name because Curator has personally instructed him on it. You just have to watch. At Madame Ghostchild's words, Coffin Man nodded. Still, he couldn't help but worry. After all, his Zombie Cthulhu was different from Evil Scholar's white cat. Meanwhile, Lin Jean was already holding the coffin lid with one hand. Exerting force, he forcefully opened it halfway. What strength! Everyone's eyes lit up. Coffin Man's coffin was obviously unusually heavy. Even if it was just a lid, it probably weighed around 200 to 300 caddies. Despite Lin Jin's frail physique, to think that he could open it with one hand. That was quite the strength. Little did they know that although Lin Jin had never cultivated any martial arts, he had tempered his physique with the vein-strengthening method. His single-arm strength was several times that of an average person. Once the coffin lid was opened, everyone turned to look at it. Coffin Man's pet beast was definitely the hot-tempered type. It was cruel and bloodthirsty. They could see this clearly. However, now that the coffin lid was open, it was extremely quiet inside. Due to the angle, no one could see what was inside the coffin. All they saw was Lin Jin tilting his head to take a look before saying, "Don't be so shy. Come, let me take a look." Chapter 265. There was still no movement from the coffin. But why did these words sound so familiar to Madame Ghostchild? Back in the visitation hall, Curator seemed to have said the same thing to his pet beast, Babyface Spider. As expected of Curator's disciple. Even the way they talk is the same, Madame Ghostchild mused. Lin Jin stared at the motionless coffin and said helplessly, "If you're not going to come out, I'll have to pull you out myself." Having said that, he reached into the coffin to grab it. This made everyone's scalps tingle. Black Crow had seen something like this before, so he was fine, but Evil Scholar felt goosebumps rising all over his body. Although he had never seen it with his own eyes, he knew that Coffin Man's pet beast was definitely an anomaly even among the mutated beasts. It was practically a monster. Yet, Appraiser Lin wasn't the least bit afraid as he reached out to grab it. What kind of courage was this? What kind of spirit was this? Evil Scholar was instantly convinced. If he were in Lin Jin's shoes, he would never have done this. Even the white cat in Lin Jin's arms was so frightened that its fur stood on end. It didn't even dare to lick the pills as it stared at the coffin with fear in its eyes. Clearly, the thing inside had scared it out of its wit. Lin Jin caressed the cat's neck with his other hand and then reached out to grab one of the zombie Cthulhu's tentacles, trying to pull it out. However, the zombie Cthulhu was stubborn. No matter how Lin Jin pulled, it wouldn't come out. This was probably a problem with its personality. Lin Jin didn't want to force the issue. After all, he had observed everything he needed to. This zombie Cthulhu was truly one of the monsters in this world. Even to Lin Jin's eyes, this creature was truly hideous. It was no wonder why it was so introverted and didn't like to meet people. It was too ugly. However, its strength was undeniable. Compared to Madame Ghostchild's babyface spider, the zombie Cthulhu was only slightly weaker. Its biggest weapon was its tentacles, which could reach up to 100 feet in length when extended. These tentacles were incredibly sturdy, like whips that could easily crush boulders. Not only that, but zombie Cthulhu also had another divine ability, but his old injuries had not healed, so he could not use it at all. Previously, Lin Jin had used its blood to appraise this monster, but now that he was touching it and seeing it with his own eyes, things were different. Strictly speaking, this zombie Cthulhu was in a serious condition. The symbiosis was broken to save Coffin Man, but things weren't looking so good for the zombie Cthulhu. Not only that, but this zombie Cthulhu's body was also incomplete. A few of its tentacles seemed to have been forcefully torn off by something, just like a human's arm being torn off. All these years, this guy must have suffered a lot and suffered a lot. Lin Jin reached out and patted zombie Cthulhu's head. Then, with a sweep of his silver needles, they pierced several vital acupoints on his body. The effect was to relieve its pain. Every time this fellow attacked and waved the chain tentacles, it would tear open a wound. It hurt both others and itself. The battle with the old dragon earlier had added to its injuries. Although zombie Cthulhu didn't say anything, Lin Jin could tell. After a few injections, zombie Cthulhu visibly relaxed. Lin Jin patted him. "Wait here for a moment. I'll help this white cat evolve first, then I'll treat you." His tone was like that of an old friend. No one in the house dared to make a sound. Only then did Evil Scholar realize that Lin Jin was talking about helping the white cat evolve. Evil Scholar was immediately overwhelmed with excitement. The white cat was currently rank 3. If it evolved, wouldn't it reach rank 4? Compared to rank 3, rank 4 wasn't just a difference of one realm. In this world, pet beasts that could achieve rank 4 were few and far between. Taking a deep breath, Evil Scholar was filled with anticipation. If the white cat was rank 4, his ranking on the villainous experts leaderboard would definitely rise. Now, he didn't dare to disturb Lin Jin. He didn't even dare to let out a fart. The white cat had finally finished licking the spirit-gathering pill clean. Knowing that it was about time, Lin Jin began to stimulate the cat's organs and meridians. The next instant, the white cat visibly enlarged. In the blink of an eye, it grew to the size of a leopard. Then, its fur fell off, its bones grew, and its eyes glowed green. Meow. With a meow, a shadow emerged from the white cat's body. Like a ferocious beast, it changed forms unpredictably. When the shadow appeared, many beasts in the royal city curled up in fear. The shadow changed into different forms, but the only thing that remained unchanged was its gigantic mouth. This mouth was like a bottomless black hole that could devour everything. Listening to the crisp sound of the white cat's bones changing, watching as its fur grew longer and its body changed, Black Crow exclaimed, "This is a complete transformation." When a pet beast evolved to rank 3, it would undergo a metamorphosis, but the same couldn't be said for rank 3 to rank 4. The white cat had clearly experienced this once before, but this time, it underwent another metamorphosis. This could only mean that the person who helped the white cat evolve had a brilliant method. Black Crow recalled how difficult it must have been for his black falcon to evolve to rank 4. Saying it was difficult was an understatement. Back then, for a chance for his black falcon to evolve, Black Crow had to compete with dozens of other experts. Back then, blood flowed like a river, all for the sake of satisfying the rank 4 beast appraiser who helped the black falcon evolve. That wasn't all. Black Crow remembered clearly that when the rank 4 beast appraiser helped the black falcon evolve, the creature had a narrow escape. It went through 3 days and 3 nights, wailing in agony. Even so, the black falcon didn't undergo a complete transformation. Black Crow spent an entire year collecting all sorts of rare pills and spending God knows how much to help the black falcon evolve to rank 4. And looking at the scholar's white cat, it had actually reached the 4th level. The process was simple and easy. This was the effect of having an expert helping the pet evolve. Could it be that Appraiser Lin was even more skilled than that rank 4 beast appraiser? It must be the curator's guidance. Black Crow shook his head. There wasn't a single rank 4 beast appraiser in the entire Jade Dragon Kingdom. If there was, the kingdom's national strength would definitely be at the top of the intermediate countries. The other 3 people's gazes were burning with anticipation. Other than Evil Scholar, who was rubbing his hands together in excitement, the other 2 also had rank 4 pet beasts. But right now they were just as curious. They had never seen an evolution method like this before. A long time ago, Madame Ghost Child and Coffin Man already had rank 4 pet beasts. But even their pet beast's evolution was a thrilling experience. Forget the amount of treasures they had to prepare, just the amount of caution and preparation they had to go through was nothing like what Lin Jin was doing right now. For Appraiser Lin to help the white cat evolve, it was as if he was doing something insignificant. All right. Just then, Lin Jin waved his hand. Silver needles flew out of the white cat's body like a ray of silver light and retracted. It was a beautiful sight to behold under the light. In this world, only the curator's faction was capable of this. Everyone was fascinated by the sight, musing about how amazing this silver needle technique was. It could be used to kill enemies, cure illnesses, and even help a pet evolve. It was simply amazing. In fact, even without Lin Jin's reminder, everyone knew that the white cat had evolved. The aura of a rank 4 pet beast was unmistakable. Chapter 266. The white cat's shadow was none other than the spirit devourer. Lin Jin looked at it, patted the cat's head, and said, "Keep it!" The white cat obediently kept its shadow and shrunk back to its normal size. Looking at it now, it no longer looked as ferocious and terrifying as before. "Go on." Lin Jin waved. The white cat was reluctant to leave, but it nimbly hopped back into Evil Scholar's arms. While Evil Scholar was excited, he also had a feeling that if Lin Jin gave the order, would the white cat break its blood contract and betray him? It was highly possible. Evil Scholar had met all sorts of beast appraisers before, but this was his first time meeting someone like Curator and Appraiser Lin. Compared to these two, the other beast appraisers were nothing. After this incident, Evil Scholar finally understood why a cold and arrogant person like Black Crow would listen to Curator. He would have done the same if he were in Curator's shoes. Nowadays, the world was dominated by beasts. Controlling a beast was equivalent to controlling everything. Forget everything else, just the villainous experts Evil Scholar interacted with on a daily basis had tried everything they could to help their pet beasts evolve, but to no avail. Some even begged for this and that to evolve their pet beasts to rank 2. Why would they do that? Having a high-level pet beast meant that one's strength and status would naturally rise. There weren't many rules in the villainous community. Strength was the most important thing. Without strength, there was no point in talking. Evil Scholar was an example. He thought his pet beast reaching rank 3 was his limit. Now that it had reached rank 4, it was just as he said. From now on, he might not be in the top 20, but he would at least be in the top 50 on the Villainous Path's expert leaderboard. "Thank you for your help, Appraiser Lin." Evil Scholar stepped forward and bowed. Lin Jin nodded. Evil Scholar had come all the way here with Black Crow to help him. Moreover, the white cat spirit devourer showed signs of evolution too. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy. If he wanted to evolve from rank 4 to peerless, it wouldn't be that easy. Even if he knew how to do it, he couldn't do it right now. White cat's matter was the last step, so it was not considered difficult. Zombie Cthulhu's matter was relatively more troublesome. Lin Jin had checked earlier. Zombie Cthulhu's limbs were missing and he didn't come out. Other than the monster's personality, there was also another reason. Zombie Cthulhu's back had fused with the bottom of the coffin, so it was difficult for him to come out. Lin Jin had only just noticed this. Zombie Cthulhu's condition was clearly more troublesome. Instead of helping him evolve, Lin Jin was trying to save his life. Plus, it wouldn't be as quick as the white cat. Even with Lin Jin's current skills, it would take him more than a month to cure Zombie Cthulhu's injuries. Lin Jin first performed a simple acupuncture on Zombie Cthulhu's pulse. When it was about time, he explained the situation to Coffin Man. "I'll also call you Old Coffin. Zombie Cthulhu has been injured for decades, and it's definitely not going to be cured in a short period of time. Moreover, his injury is far more serious than that of the infant spider. If it weren't for this coffin made of 1,000-year-old locust wood, he wouldn't have been able to survive until now. Moreover, he has become a second nature of killing over the years and is now haunted by resentment. If you trust me, you can leave Zombie Cthulhu with me for at least half a month, or at most a month. Then, you can come and retrieve him. If you trust me, leave Zombie Cthulhu with me for at least half a month or a month before you come back to retrieve him. By then, Zombie Cthulhu's old injuries should be healed." Now that Lin Jin was willing to treat his pet beast, how could he refuse? "Appraiser Lin, you can leave Zombie Cthulhu here. Even I, Old Coffin, plan to stay by your side as long as you don't find me a bother," Coffin Man said sincerely. At this, Lin Jin shook his head. He hated trouble the most. Keeping Zombie Cthulhu around was for treatment, but keeping Coffin Man around would be bad. Moreover, Lin Jin had too many secrets, so it would be inconvenient to have someone around him. Seeing Lin Jin shake his head, Coffin Man was about to say something when Madame Ghostchild spoke up. old coffin, don't stay by Appraiser Lin's side and cause him trouble. Didn't you say that old turtle is dying? Let's go look for him. If we can find him in time, Curator or Appraiser Lin can still save him. Coffin Man's eyes lit up when he heard this. That's right, that old bastard old turtle has to hold on for me. Ghost Child, come with me to find him. If he finds out about your current situation, he'll be ecstatic. Black Crow and Evil Scholar were tactful. Appraiser Lin clearly preferred peace and quiet. Now that their business was done, it was time for them to leave. Moreover, Evil Scholar had achieved his goal. After his pet beast evolved, there were still many things he had to do, so he couldn't stay here any longer. And so, the two got up to leave. This was exactly what Lin Jin wanted. My friends, we're friends now. If there's anything you need, feel free to look for me. Or, you can look for Curator when the visitation hall is open. Lin Jin got up and saluted them. Before the four of them left, Coffin Man touched the coffin and said a few words to Zombie Cthulhu before leaving reluctantly. Although it was already late, no one could stop the four of them from leaving the city. As they walked, Evil Scholar was all smiles. He had gained the most out of all of them this time. To be honest, Curator's supernatural powers are unfathomable. I didn't expect his disciple to be this powerful as well. This has truly been an eye-opener. Curator is elusive and mysterious, but his disciple is easy to find. If there's nothing else to do in the future, we should get to know Appraiser Lin better. Evil Scholar's words were the same thought shared by all four of them. Even Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild, who were admitted into the visitation hall, shared the same thought. The reason was simple. Before the Curator, they trembled in fear. Even though the Curator's tone was gentle and kind at times, he still exuded an intimidating aura that terrified them. But Lin Jin was different. He gave off a sense of closeness. It was as if one was a prodigious son that one could only look up to, while the other was a mortal that one could befriend or even call brother. With Appraiser Lin's skills, he's already at the level of a rank 4 beast appraiser. At this moment, Black Crow seemed to have thought of something and spoke. That's right. Being able to promote a rank 3 beast to rank 4 means that he's a rank 4 beast appraiser. But from the beast tattoo on Appraiser Lin's sleeve, he's only a rank 2 beast appraiser, Evil Scholar added. It's all because this Jade Dragon Kingdom is trash. The strongest beast appraiser in the Beast Appraisal Association is only at rank 3. Now, it all depends on whether Appraiser Lin is willing to help. If Appraiser Lin is willing to help, Jade Dragon Kingdom will definitely be able to become one of the top countries in the future, Coffin Man said. The few of them nodded in agreement. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.